Finance Committee will come back to order. Members, we have one more bill today, and that is Senator Newman's Senate File 1154, House File 1683. Working off the first engrossment. Senator Newman, welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, members, thank you. I did watch the Veterans bill this morning. I assume this one is going to go as quick and easy as that one. Would that be a fair assumption?
How long did you go last night?
Madam Chair, Senate File 1154 is the Transportation Omnibus Bill. Before we get started with the bill, I do have an amendment, the A48. If I could have offered, then I would explain it very briefly.
Senator Ingebrigtsen moves the A48 amendment. Senator Newman, and it is being passed out as we speak, and it is posted. We'll wait just a minute. There's a lot of numbers here.
It's really not as bad as it looks.
It's scary looking. You're good to go with this? Okay. Okay, Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, members, if you look at page 4, lines 19 through 20, the purpose of the amendment is to fix the debt service or add the debt service. Then on page 7.16 through 7.22, I'm told that's a reviser's fix. And that would be about all the information I have on that. And then the balance of the amendment is just various reorganization, but no changes to the first engrossment. And Ms. Stengel or Ms. Boyd could answer any other questions that the members may have.
Thank you, Senator Newman. Ms. Boyd or Senator Newman, why did the debt service go up from about 60 million in 2024? Okay, so it's just going up. You're just recalculating the debt service. Okay, get it. I answered my own question. Senator, Ms. Boyd.
Madam Chair, thank you. I can just to briefly clarify. The base already increased in 24 and 25, the base that passed in our last biennial transportation budget for debt service. The base is changed on lines 419 and 420 to account for some trunk highway bonding that's already in the first engrossment of the bill. So this would be new authorization, so there is a bit of new debt service added to that.
Okay, very good. Any questions on A48? I see none. Senator Ingebrigtsen renews his motion on the A48. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Amendment is adopted. Senator Newman.
Madam Chair and members, I'll explain a very broad overview of the bill and just direct your attention as to the various articles. And the way this bill has been arranged is the different articles involve different topics in the Transportation Omnibus Bill. Article 1 is the total appropriation for MnDOT DPS and the Met Council. Article 2, that begins on page 18, and that deals with the matching funds and the federal IIJA funds. Article 3 is the trunk highway bond appropriations. That's on page 24 is where it begins. And the trunk highway bond appropriation is right at about $300 million. Article 4 involves Department of Public Safety. That begins, members, on page 29. And it deals with various bills within the Department of Public Safety arena. Article 5 deals with the independent expert review bills. That begins on page 52. And just by way of brief explanation, a number of years ago, after we dealt with the old MinLars system and put in the new MinDrive system, there was some discussion on the fact that we had spent a whole bunch of money on this new computer system. The deputy registrars were concerned because they were given additional work with this new system. And the Department of Public Safety indicated that they needed funding and additional staff. And because it felt like we weren't making a lot of progress with the new system, Chair Hornstein and I in the House decided to put together another independent expert review headed up by Rick King. He is the one that did the one on MinLars and MinDrive. And during the off-season, Mr. King and his team did in fact do the review that we had asked them to and came back with recommendations for the legislature as to how to resolve the various questions dealing with deputy registrars, their workload, their fee increases, and the request from the Department of Public Safety. What you will see in Article 5 are not all but most of the recommendations that Mr. King and his staff put together in their independent expert review of that issue. Article 6 deals with salvage titles. That begins on page 73. For a number of years, Senator Jasinski has been dealing with this issue, and it involves motor vehicles who have that have been damaged severely, many of whom were coming into the state of Minnesota from out of state. And if I recall correctly, the initial controversy arose after the hurricane in New Orleans, Katrina, I think, where vehicles were flooded, and that's really hard on computer systems. And those vehicles were coming into Minnesota, and no indication to the consumers how badly these vehicles have been damaged. So the salvage title Article 6 deals with that and is in reality a consumer protection article. Article 7 deals with the Department of Transportation, mostly policy that directly deals with Minnesota Department of Transportation. And then Article 8 is the article involving the Met Council. That begins on page 103, and that is also policy issues. I have seated to my right Ms. Boyd, who can walk us through the spreadsheet if you are so inclined, and I have Ms. Stengel to my left, who can help us with any policy questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Newman. The Article 8, the Met Council, this is dual tracked? Senator Newman? Is this also dealing with the funds that Senator Dibble worked with, that we heard on the floor? No, this is completely
I
different.
don't think so.
No, okay, very good.
No.
Ms. Boyd, to the spreadsheet, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have the spreadsheet in front of you for the Senate File 1154 first engrossment. I'll be walking through the Senate columns, which are the last 6 columns on the sheet. Just briefly to start, and to focus mostly on general funds in these comments, there are 3 main thrusts here. One is the federal funds match, the federal funds match for spending that the governor had in his request.
Technology.
Well, okay, that's debatable.
Debatable?
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Please continue.
Madam Chair, related to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And the next is 100% dedication of auto part sales tax to transportation purposes, so you'll see some appropriations relative to that as well. And then there are some other small general fund pieces I'll point out. So starting on line 12, this is a piece of the federal match funding for the IIJA. This is multimodal funding from the general fund for aeronautics to match some federal program, formula programs, and I believe some discretionary programs as well on dealing with aeronautics. That's $6.5 million a year, starting in fiscal year '22. Under transit, on line 17 and 18, this is likewise some match funding for multimodal projects. Under transit, there's $7 million a year for Greater Minnesota projects to the department, and then $10 million a year from Met Council for Metro Transit match funding. On line 24, this is a reduction in the bill of $500,000 a year for the Office of Passenger Rail at MnDOT from the general fund. $500,000 a year is their base appropriation, so that appropriation would be reduced to zero. On line 29, there is a base increase for the Safe Routes to School program from the general fund of $1 million in '23, and then ongoing 2.5 in '24 and 10.5 thereafter. On line 40 is the remainder of the multimodal federal match funding, $13.1 million a year, and this is available for MnDOT to apply for various discretionary grant programs and some other available formula funding under the federal bill. Then we move into state roads, starting on line 48. There's some federal match funding from the Trunk Highway Fund for operations and maintenance of state roads. And then on the next page, I'm sorry, I'll point that out, that's $4 million in '22, and it goes up from there to 7.5 in '23 and ongoing. On the next page, under state road construction, on line 64 is a base increase to state road construction, and that would be from available funds in the Trunk Highway Fund, yeah, that would be from available funds in the Trunk Highway Fund, and that's at $750,000 in '23, and then increasing in the base to $2.5 million in '24 and $5 million in '25. And then on the next two lines deal with federal funds. Line 65 is the actual federal funds anticipated from the Federal Highway Administration for the state road construction program. Those funds flow directly into the Trunk Highway Fund and have to be directly appropriated. So the $152 million in '22 and $163 million in '23 is an acknowledgement of the federal funds. And then the next line would be available match funding for those on line 66 of $41 million and $69 million from the Trunk Highway Fund. On line 71 is a base increase to the Corridors of Commerce program under state roads, and that's $2 million, and that's also from Trunk Highway. $2 million in '23, and greater amounts in the base, in the tail, 62.5 in '24 and $90 million in '25. And this is supported with not only existing amounts in the Trunk Highway Fund, but also the recognition of new revenues to the fund from dedication of the auto parts sales tax. Let's see, then we'll move to local roads. Under county state aid highways, starting on line 84, this reflects the revenue from the auto part sales tax that would flow through. The auto part sales tax would be dedicated 100% to transportation, 86% to highway user tax fund, which passes through to the state aid funds and to Trunk Highway. So this is an acknowledgement of that flow through amount that would be appropriated out for state aid. On line 84, 85 is a particular dedication under auto parts, 86% to highway user tax, 7% for town roads, and 7% for small cities. So this is the 7% for town roads on line 85, and that's directly appropriated through the county state aid highway fund. Line 86 is revenue that would flow down to state aid accounts or state aid funds through an increase in electric vehicle surcharges that's in the bill. Currently, you pay for electric vehicles an extra $75 surcharge on your registration taxes, and there's an increase in the bill, which we can see later. And this is that new revenue that flows through the highway user tax fund, and this would be the county state aid piece. Line 87 is some match funding that flows down through to the county state aid highway fund from the transfer from the general fund to the highway user tax fund that I'll show you later in the spreadsheet. Similar for municipal state aid streets, starting on line 92, this would be their piece of the auto part sales tax that is appropriated with those revenues. Line 93 is the increase related to EV surcharge increases. And line 94 is the match funding from the transfer from general fund to HUTDF to accommodate that. I'm not reading out amounts, Madam Chair, but I can certainly do that if I should slow down and do that. On line 100, this is the other dedication of the auto part sales tax to small cities. They have 7%. There is an existing small cities assistance account in statute that money is being dedicated to. That's roughly $22.4 million a year, and starting in '23. And later in the policy articles, we've made that account to have a statutory appropriation so that the department can distribute those funds as they come in, now that we have a dedicated source. Then the next change item is on line 133 on page 3. This is under Metropolitan Council. This is a reduction to the base appropriation for Metro Transit starting in fiscal year '23 of $10 million a year. And then the next items are, we're moving down to Department of Public Safety. Under State Patrol on line 153, this is a one-time appropriation from the general fund of $45.1 million to fund, I believe, 3 twin-engine helicopters and 3 airplanes for the State Patrol. And then related to that on line 154 is an ongoing increase to their Trunk Highway Fund appropriation. State Patrol is funded through the Trunk Highway Fund, and this would be an increase to accommodate increased maintenance, insurance, space costs related to those new aircraft. On page 4, there's a number of new appropriations to driver and vehicle services. Starting on line 165, this is a one-time appropriation of $500,000 from the Driver Services Operating Account in the Special Revenue Fund for installation of security cameras at DVS offices. And then the next line on 166 is a one-time appropriation of $1.25 million from the same account for installation of security cameras at Deputy Registrar and Driver's License Agent offices. Line 167 is for administration and oversight staff costs related to the third-party commercial driver's license testing program in the policy articles, and that is $429,000 in '23, going down to $390,000 a year thereafter. Line 168 similarly are staff costs related to oversight and administration of the online driver's education program in the policy article, and that's $108,000 in '23, $49,000 a year thereafter. On line 169 is a one-time cost related to expanding eligibility and documentation related to getting a veteran's designation on your driver's license, and that's a one-time, I believe, printing cost for applications for those new provisions. And then under vehicle services, starting on line 176, I'll start on 177. There is an item later in the independent expert review article for DVS making a statutory appropriation per type of transaction, whether it's online or mail, and whether license plates are being mailed out or not, that the department will be statutorily appropriated per transaction. And that is estimated at this point to be about $4.2 million a year from that statutory, so their direct appropriation is reduced by the same amount on line 176. And then 178 has to do with a new full-service providers account. Full-service providers are those offices that perform both deputy registrar and driver's license agent functions. And the new account was created to collect some fee revenue that I'll talk about in the revenue section, and this is just the distribution out of that statutory disbursement. And that's about $9.2 million in the first year from that account. Under traffic safety on line those are tiny, 185. This is an increase to the grants that were created in our last budget bill last year to provide grants to school districts and school bus companies to install cameras on school bus arms. And this is an increase to those grants of $4 million in '23 and $8 million in '24 and 0 thereafter. And that is from the general fund. On line 186 is a one-time appropriation to the Office of Traffic Safety of $19,000. This is from the Driver and Vehicle Services Technology account in the Special Revenue Fund, and this is to account for costs for provision we'll see later, which would allow deputy registrars access to crash records to provide those when requested. Then we'll move down to line 196. There are a number of other road and, mostly road projects at the end of Article 1 in the bill, and these are those one-time projects. Most are from the Trunk Highway Fund. There is on line 209 an appropriation from the Rail Service Improvement Account in the Special Revenue Fund for a freight rail car storage facility in Lakeville. And then on line 210, there is one general fund project, which is construction of a noise barrier along I-694 in Oakdale, and that's $5.5 million one time. On line 216 of the spreadsheet on page 5, there is a statutory appropriation related to a provision later in the bill. The existing data security account in the Special Revenue Fund has money that has been accumulating, I believe, since about 2014 from the charge on the sales of bulk records, driver and vehicles data. There is no appropriation attached to that account, so the money has been accumulating. There's provision in the bill to make a statutory appropriation of those funds to the Office of the Legislative Auditor to do sort of data audits on that process. So this is from the fiscal note that the OLA provided, that that money will start going out at about $241,000 in '23 and roughly the same thereafter. Then we'll move down to transfers and revenues. On line 232, there is that there is the transfer from the general fund to the highway user tax fund. This is to account for the funds needed for federal funds matching. And you'll see that it's $76 million in '22 and $130 million in '23, and it increases from there. It totals $206.8 million in the first biennium and about $300 million in the second biennium. And then that money will flow through, as I said, as per the Constitution and per statute, down to the Trunk Highway Fund, the state aid funds, town roads, town bridges, et cetera. On revenues, under Department of Transportation, on line 239, that just shows the transfer into the HUTD fund from that transfer. On line 240, this is the acknowledgement of the revenue from the federal highway bill from the IIJA to the Trunk Highway Fund. And then on lines 243 to 246, you'll see the rundown of the new dedication 100 parts of the auto part sales tax revenues to transportation. There is the reduction in revenue to the general fund on line 243, and then the flow through to the other funds from the HUTD on the, the HUTD line is on 244, and then the next two are the 7% dedication each for town roads and for small cities. On line 247, you'll see the revenue from the increase in the surcharges on electric vehicles, about roughly $4 million in the first year, 4.6 in '24, and 5.4 million in '25, and that money goes into the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. Under Department of Public Safety, there's a number of small acknowledgements of revenue related to new special plates that are in the bill, the Air Medal Special Veterans Plates, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relative Special Plates, the Minnesota Pro Sports Team Foundation Special Plates, and the New Vikings Foundation Special Plates. Vikings Foundation one is a little bit larger because there's an estimation of a larger wish for that plate in the first year from the fiscal note for that, so that's a little bit larger. And that all goes into the Vehicle Services Operating Account in the Special Revenue Fund. The next are mostly related to the independent expert review pieces in the bill. On lines 255 and 256 is a loss of revenue to the Driver Services and Vehicle Services operating accounts from allowing DRs and DLAs to provide records, driver and vehicle and crash records. These are things that the DVS offices would usually do, so that would be basically a loss to the operating accounts revenue, and the filing fees would be kept by the DRs and DLAs for providing those records. Lines 260, I'm sorry, they're very tiny, 257 and 258 is a new $5 surcharge for doing renewal transactions, tab renewal transactions by mail. And that is anticipated to increase revenues to the Vehicle Services operating account of $2.25 million in the first year and $3 million thereafter. And similarly, that would be a surcharge that would go to the full service providers, DRs, for doing those transactions by mail in the same amounts. 259 through 261 are changes to the filing fee for DRs. Currently, if a transaction is completed at a DVS office, the DVS office, or DVS keeps that fee and it goes into the operating accounts. If a deputy registrar completes a transaction, they keep the filing fee. This would take some of the revenue that comes into the vehicle services operating account and to the technology account and redistribute it to, the fee schedule is changed so that some of that revenue would go to the full service provider account. So you'll see that there are negative revenues on line 259 and 260 for the DVS accounts, and that's 5.5 million and 1.5 million respectively, and then a gain of that amount, about 6.97 million in the first year for the full service providers. On line 262, this is a filing fee increase for driver transactions. Currently, that filing fee is $8, and that is going up depending on whether it's a new or renewal driver's license. That revenue is expected to be about 1.1 million in the first year, and that goes into the driver services operating account at the department. Line 263 is the cost of, there's a provision in the bill to allow holders of, with some parameters, holders of out-of-state driver's license to waive the exam requirements for getting a Minnesota driver's license, and this would be acknowledging that some of that fee revenue would be lost, and that's about $183,000 in the first year and ongoing, and that is, again, the driver services operating account. Line 264 is an increase. There's an increased fee in the bill related to having to retake skills and knowledge tests. Those fees would go up by $10 each time, and this is an increase of about $758,000 in new revenue to the driver services operating account. On line 265 is a small loss of revenue related to third-party CDL testing program. If the test needs to be retaken, that fee would then be lost because the third-party testers could do retests of those people seeking the CDL, and that would be a loss of retake fee revenue to the driver services operating account. Almost done. Lines 267 through 271 is a summary of all the changes, revenue changes to the highway user tax distribution fund, and showing how that affects the funds that it passes through to. So you'll see the trunk highway fund increase on line 269, county state aid on 270, and municipal state aid on 271. And again, that compiles the changes from the transfer in for the federal funds match, the auto part sales tax, and the electric vehicle surcharge increases. And then lastly, Madam Chair, on line 295, there is the bottom line on the general fund pieces of the bill. You can see that accounts to, in fiscal year 22 and 23, an increase in general fund net of $499.3 million, and in 24 and 25, $749.2 million. And lastly, I'll just point out in the notes section that lines 300 on is just a summary of the trunk highway fund bond projects that are in Article 3 of the bill. Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Unless you don't want me to do this, there are some sections at the end of Article 2 related to federal funds that aren't reflected in the spreadsheet, if you would like me to walk through them briefly.
Yes, I actually would, because Mr. Nauman tallied up the federal match, and it's a little bit different than what we have scored. So if we could go through that, that'd be great. What section is that?
Starting on page 19. And Madam Chair, I'm not sure what the difference is. Perhaps Mr. Nauman and I can discuss that
Mr. Nauman?
at some point.
Madam Chair, I was doing two things at once. Is this
No.
about the federal match? So I just want to make sure that we've accumulated the proper line items, because I think we were seeking 280 million in IIJA match. I think that's what the caucus provided to the jurisdiction. And the line items that I was summing in indicated 248 in fiscal 23. So maybe Ms. Boyd and I can talk offline and see whether there's a reconciliation we need to do.
Or better yet, the question is the 280 reflected in the spreadsheet?
Madam Chair, I believe it is. We're probably just looking at it differently, and I'll have to, I can point out the pieces now if you'd like, or we can speak afterward.
Yes, please. Yes, Ms. Boyd, go
To
ahead.
speak to it now?
Yes.
The line items? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll start with the transfer, and that would
And
be
we are on page what?
page 5 of the spreadsheet, on line 232. I'm going to do my own little math on the side here. That would be 206.8 million transfer out of the general fund to the highway user tax fund in 22 and 23. And then we've got a number of direct appropriations from the general fund related to federal funds sprinkled throughout the bill. The first is on page 1 of the spreadsheet. On line 12 would be 13 million for aeronautics. On line 20, that's a total of 34 million for transit. And I believe the only other one is on line 40, 13.1, and that is for other multimodal projects that the department would be applying for funds for.
Line 48,
Line 40.
and then 48?
Oh, 26.2, I'm sorry, 13 a year, 26.2.
And then line 48?
I'm sorry, line 48. Yes, but that is from trunk highway, Madam
That's
Chair.
trunk
That would
highway.
not
Oh,
be
that's right.
related to the general fund ask.
Mr. Nauman? Worked with you so long, I know when you want it.
So, Madam Chair, this can get into accounting very quickly. I went through and regardless of fund, summed up all the totals and ended up with a different number. So I think it might be advisable for Ms. Boyd and I to just to talk on the side and make sure that we're thinking about it the same way.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then I'll just turn to some language, if you'd like me to, in the article. Article
Absolutely.
2. I'm going to start on page 19 of the bill, lines 1919 to 1923. This is language that, the appropriations in the bill, I should point out, are split up into two pieces. All the ones related to federal funds match are in Article 2 of the bill. All other appropriations are in Article 1. So this just states that all the appropriations under the Department of Transportation section are for the match requirement under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And then on page 21, there is some rider language under that 13.1 million a year available for other multimodal grant programs through the department that just puts some parameters on what grant programs are not available for this match funding. There's some language on 2130 to 2132 pointing out that this cannot be used as match funding for guideway or passenger rail projects. And then lastly, there is a requirement that the commissioner report to the chairs and ranking minority members of the legislative committees of transportation if an application is made for any of these programs using this, under which this match funding would be anticipated to be used. Page 22, section 3 is there is some electric vehicle infrastructure formula funding in the IIJA, and this is some policy language around use of that, stating that the match requirements must be committed only from non-state sources for these formula and other discretionary grant programs for electric vehicles. Subdivision 2 says that no more than 25% of the projects from federal funds can be located at rest areas. Subdivision 3 requires a regional balance as allowable under federal law throughout the state for these projects. And subdivision 4 is a requirement that the how can I briefly explain this? That the department ask the United States FHWA to certify that our alternative fuel corridors are built out, and that would allow the funds that are available to be used on other parts of the road system in the state. Section 4 has two pieces of reporting required around this. The first, under subdivision 1, requires that any plans or reports that are required to the federal government as a result of use of IIJA-related funds should also be submitted to the chairs of the transportation committees in the legislature. And subdivision 2 requires a report semi-annually until the IIJ funds are all expended. In 5 years, I believe, semi-annual reporting on how these funds have been used and how they might be anticipated to be used before the next report. Section 5 on page 23 just shows the transfer from the general fund to the highway user tax fund. Section 6 is a prohibition on, the Reconnect Rondo project is defined in subdivision 1, and then the next two subdivisions have prohibitions for the Commissioner of Transportation and the Met Council on expending any money for this project. And then the next two are some parameters around the use of federal funding. Section 7 says that any money for federal match funding related to the IIJA must be spent according to a direct appropriation. So no previous appropriations available to the department can be used for that match funding. And then under Section 8, it says that any expense of federal funds related to the IIJA must not be spent except pursuant to a direct appropriation. And that's all I had, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Ms. Stengel, and then we'll have questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Do you want me to go through the policy articles? Okay. We have like 80 pages, so I'll just do a real high-level overview to not take up a whole bunch of time, but I'm happy to point out the specific sections or answer any questions. So I'll just sort of go thematically through the articles. Article 4, starting on page 29, relates to the Department of Public Safety. And some of the highlights of this article, Section 1 has to do with the data security account, and the money in that account is appropriated to the OLA for overseeing security of data that's stored and transmitted by the states. And it deletes some specific auditing requirements related to that data security account. As Ms. Boyd mentioned, there's an increase in the all-electric vehicle surcharge, excuse me, as well as imposing new surcharges on plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and electric motorcycles and plug-in electric motorcycles. There are several new license plates that Ms. Boyd outlined. There's some changes for towing regulations, specifically what charges can be part of a lien. Online driver's education is authorized. Third-party testing for commercial driver's license is authorized, and then there are various other sort of smaller and agency provisions in this article. Article 5, as Senator Newman outlined, is the independent expert review article. We've talked about full service providers, what those are. It's one person that provides driver's license services as well as vehicle registration services. So they provide full service across the spectrum. There are the fee sharing provisions that Ms. Boyd talked about, where a portion of the mail-in online transactions done by DPS are put into an account and then allocated to full service providers on a proportional basis. Driver's license expiration dates are extended from 4 years to 8 years. DPS is required to provide vision and photo equipment to all of the full service providers, and that's a new requirement to some degree. There's a provision about discipline for accessing MnDRIVE data improperly and allowing the commissioner to impose a range of discipline instead of revocation of rights. There's some provisions relating to exam station locations and setting a minimum number of stations in the state to be 40, and that's the bottom threshold. They can have more than that. Requirements for posting information on exam times and locations on the website to be able to look at that real time and see what the availability is. New Minnesota residents won't be required to take a written knowledge test. There's a statutory appropriation that Ms. Boyd talked about to DPS for mail-in online registrations, and there's a set amount. So for each transaction, that amount is statutorily appropriated, and that's on a monthly basis. And then there were several other recommendations made by the report that are also included in this article. Article 6 starts on page 73. This is the salvage and prior salvaged title brand article, and this was the product of a task force that worked throughout the last year looking at this issue. The main change here is there's a new title brand called prior salvage, and this is for lower value or older vehicles that have a history of damage. So now any sort of vehicle, regardless of age or value, will have a title brand if it was damaged. There's a lot of reorganization and updating some of the language in this article, and as Senator Newman mentioned, it closes the loopholes for out-of-state vehicles coming into Minnesota and sort of having their titles washed. Article 7 starts on page 82. This is the MnDOT article. There's a provision that allows electric vehicle charging stations to be placed at rest stops. There are several changes to the Corridors of Commerce process, specifically how projects are identified and selected. There's a annual report that the Attorney General and MMB do to look at highway purpose expenditures. That's moved from session law and is now codified. Some changes to oversize and overweight permits for tow trucks, a special permit, ag permit to haul grass seed. There's a pavement life cycle cost analysis that the commissioner is required to do for certain road projects. Ms. Boyd already talked about the dedication of auto part sales tax and the statutory appropriation of small cities assistance account that goes with that. And then there are some other various changes that come from the agencies and other places. And then finally, the Met Council article. Madam Chair, earlier you asked about, I think you're asking about the Southwest Light Rail audit, perhaps. That's not in here, that was carried separately. A lot of what Article 8 has to do with is called a guideway. A guideway is a form of public transit that operates within a separated right-of-way. So if it has its own road, basically, or on rails. So it includes some bus lines and LRT. Provisions in this article include requiring counties that use transportation sales tax for guideways to provide reporting about past use and proposed future uses, requires the Met Council to post ridership and crime statistics, requires some bus driver training for helping riders with disabilities to enter and exit the bus, allows metro counties to be responsible authorities for light rail projects and requires that in some cases, requires municipal approval of all guideway projects, requires cost-benefit analysis done for guideways, requires counties that have guideways in them to be solely responsible for those costs, so the Met Council and the state aren't paying for those. Changes the source of funding for a post-COVID transit study from trunk highway to the Met Council budget, requires the Met Council to request the federal government's permission to terminate North Star, and it suspends guideway activities until Southwest Light Rail is in revenue operations.
Thank you, Ms. Stengel. Senator Newman, I do have a question, and then we'll start some other questions. The Met Council match you chose to take out of, I believe, the general fund. Was that the guidelines that were given from the feds? Was that just a personal choice to 20 million in 22, 23, and another 20 million in 24, 25? And I thought they were sitting on some extra funds.
Yeah, I think I'll have Ms. Boyd explain that, but in a way, we're taking it away and giving it right back. It really amounts to the same money, but Ms. Boyd, can you answer that question?
Ms. Boyd?
Madam Chair, the 10 million that's on line 18 of the spreadsheet, that was part of the governor's request, that go toward 10 million of it be appropriated to MnDOT and then transferred to Met Council, and that would allow them to have match funding for FTA programs and projects related to metropolitan transit. So that is part of the governor's ask on the federal match. And then on line, where is it? On line 133 on page 3 of the spreadsheet is a $10 million reduction to Metro Transit's general fund appropriation. That is not part of the governor's recommendations, and that's not labeled a federal match. It's just a choice of the committee and of the bill to reduce that by the same amount.
Thank you for pointing that out. And Ms. Boyd, and Senator Newbern, the Quarters of Commerce and the Safe Routes to School have large tails. Start off small and ramp up quite large. Reason for that, could you explain?
Do you want me to walk through that?
Ms. Boyd?
Madam Chair, there's a certain amount of trunk highway funding that would be available both from the dedication of the auto part sales tax starting in fiscal year 23 and from the existing trunk highway fund balance. I believe it's about 158 million in 23, and some of that will be spent. In the first year, in fiscal year 23, a large part of that spending is happening under MnDOT other road projects, and that is on page 5 of the spreadsheet, I believe, page 4 of the spreadsheet. So you'll see, I don't have a total on the trunk highway pieces there, but it's the total minus about roughly 6.2 million. So it's right around 220 million is spent from the trunk highway fund for those one-time projects in the first year, leaving a small amount left over to dedicate to the existing ongoing appropriation for state road construction and Quarters of Commerce. However, that money is still available in the tails from auto part sales tax and from what's left of the fund balance in 24 and 25, so that available money was put in state road construction and quarters of commerce starting in fiscal year 24. And that's why they increased then.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Are there any questions for Ms. Boyd or Ms. Stengel?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator.
I have a question to follow up on your question.
Okay.
Regarding the Met Council reduction, so on page 1, line 18, that's the federal match part, and then, as you said, on 133 is the reduction. Ms. Boyd, can you please clarify if my recollection is that the federal match funds are obviously for a limited number of years, but I believe that the reduction goes on through in the base in perpetuity. Is that correct?
Ms. Boyd?
Madam Chair and Senator Kent, the federal funds available are available for 5 years. However, the mechanism in the bill that transfers the money for the match from the general fund to the highway user tax fund is also ongoing. So that transfer would still occur after the federal funds are no longer available to match in 5 years. So they would both be ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Any further questions on that? We do have Commissioner Harrington here, and so we will stay close, Ms. Stengel and Ms. Boyd, but Commissioner Harrington, welcome.
Boy, did you scare them away.
I have that effect sometimes, though. Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Welcome to the committee, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Chair Rosen, Senator Newman, and members of the committee. My name, for the record, is John Harrington. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. I want to start out by thanking Senator Newman for including the DPS requested changes of eliminating all the plate fees for Gold Star families. Those families that have already sacrificed so much should not have to sacrifice further, and we are very appreciative of making that movement. We also want to acknowledge the creation of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Special License Plates. I know Senator Newman has not been a fan of specialty plates, and we have appreciated his holding the line on those for a number of years as we got MnDRIVE set up, but we really do think this is going to be a great boon to a reward fund that will help us investigate those particular cases. I will say that I need to voice my concern over 2 deficiency requests that were put forward by my agency that are not in the bill. We presented both of these in front of his committee in February. They're real deficiencies, and they are having an effect and will continue to have an effect as we move forward now. The first of these is the State Patrols. The State Patrol will run out of general fund dollars this month. And the dollars that we're talking about here are the dollars that we use for capital security. Now, I want to make it clear that this does not mean that the State Patrol will stop protecting the Capitol, because we will continue to do that. That is a statutory mandate for us. But it will mean that instead of general fund dollars to support that, we will have to dip into trunk highway dollars, and that will essentially just create a different deficit. And that, to us, doesn't make any sense when the deficiency is a general fund deficiency. It was a result of additional work that the State Patrol had to do to address protests and large gatherings here at the Capitol. We will note that, and I don't see Senator Jasinski in your committee, but I did note for the record in an earlier committee, we're very appreciative of the $45 million in this bill from Senator Newman and Senator Jasinski for aviation support. And I can tell you, those aircraft are being used every day that weather permits. We use them to reduce the likelihood of dangerous crashes as we're pursuing carjacking suspects, and they have been instrumental in making very significant arrests, including murder suspects that we have been looking for. They are absolutely an essential component of the State Patrol's work. But we really do need to get the deficiency made up in addition to the aircraft request. And we are happy to support both, but we want to get the deficiency request taken care of as quickly as possible. The second deficiency request is for driver and vehicle services, which will run out of money to produce license plates and tabs and other vehicle services. This is a deficiency that we've known has been coming. It's due to frankly, it's an unforeseen consequence of the pandemic, but once we spotted it, we took immediate action to not make it any worse. So the deficiency has existed because when many of the offices were closed, people went online to buy their plates. This increased the volume of plates, and what it really did is it really hit our ability to stock plates at a DR or at a state agency, and as a consequence, our mailing costs went up, our handling costs went up, and that cost is continuing to grow. Once we saw that happen, we froze hiring, and that has had another unintended consequence, which is to say that we haven't been able to fill people in the PIC, which is the Public Information Center, and we are seeing 45-minute hold times in the PIC right now. We do not think that's what good public service looks like. We do not think that your constituents or anybody else's constituent should have to wait for 45 minutes on hold listening to the elevator music that we play to be able to get an answer to a question in the PIC. And we also know that even on email requests, we're on a 10-day delay before we're getting responses to those email requests. And that's not acceptable to us, but given the deficiency, we have frozen our hiring, and so this is the unintended consequence of that deficiency. Another point that we would like to see that is not in this bill is cancer and PTSD benefits added to the category of line of duty death. One of the tasks I have is that I am the arbiter on line of duty death benefits for police, fire, and EMS. And I can tell you just literally within the last month, I was down in Albert Lea at the funeral of Albert Lea Fire Lieutenant Brett Bass. Now, Brett Bass was, by all accounts, he was in races and fire Olympics just a few years ago. And having no prior history of cancer, cancer came in and it took him from his family, both his personal family and from his fire family, within really matters of months. This was a robust, healthy, tough, athletic firefighter who cancer took away from his community and from his family. And under current statute, he may or may not be compensated as a line of duty death. I did rule on the Pater case, which is a St. Paul case, with very similar circumstances. 2 years ago, in the gym, lifting weights, robust, was tough enough to be in not only his own St. Paul fire, but also to volunteer in another community's fire department. And within a matter of months, cancer laid him low and took him from his family. We think this needs to be included in the line of duty death category. And we also think that PTSD needs to also be included in that. We know that firefighters and cops are seeing things that they can't unsee. And when that takes a toll on them in their personal lives, we know that sometimes we lose them to PTSD. And we would love to see this category added into the line of duty deaths. I will note, and I want to give great credit here, Rick King has been a godsend. When I got here, my first meeting with Senator Newman, he had a file that was thicker than the phone book on correspondence in regards to MNLARS, and we were directed by him and Governor Walz to find a solution. And Rick King was absolutely one of the major pieces of us finding the solution and getting implemented so that MnDrive is running and running very, very well. We appreciate Rick King's expertise and his staff's team work on this. We do have one cautionary tale that we'd like to note here. We think that the majority of the recommendations from the expert review make absolute sense, and we are supportive of those. And we're pleased to see them in this bill. The one area that we're concerned about is fee sharing. And the issue is, while DPS does support the deputy registers getting compensated fairly for the important work that they do, They are the deputy registers of the Department of Public Safety's registration office. And so we recognize that they are doing the work. They're doing a great deal of the work. And we are appreciative that in this bill, you have tripled their fees, going from an $8 filing fee to a $24 filing fee. So we believe that that has been addressed in this bill. But also in this bill is a movement to take work that is solely and 100% done by the Department of Vehicle Services and to share the fees that we get from those activities with the deputy registers. And while we are absolutely supportive of compensating them for the work that they do, we don't think it is good public policy to give them revenue that state employees are doing, and they're the only ones that are doing it at this time. So we believe that that area could be changed, and we're talking a difference to the Department of Vehicle Services that is $9.2 million annually out of their budget. So between the deficiency and this 9.2, this would further erode our ability to provide the services that we are being asked to provide. We are, note in here that we had asked for a DVS to collect race and ethnicity data. This is really a part of being more and more transparent. We hear, whether it's with the State Patrol or other law enforcement agencies, that they're accused of racial profiling. And the answer to that oftentimes is we can't tell you whether they were or weren't because we don't have the data to know who was driving in an area. And so in other states, Connecticut comes to mind, they collect this data. It is private data. It is not accessible to the law enforcement agency. It is not on the driver's license, and it is voluntarily collected. So people would have an option to add this to their driver's record, and in those states where they do this, they can then do data dives to try and identify, is there a disproportionate amount of stops or tags involving drivers of color or of different genders or ethnicities. We think this is prudent for us to move into as a voluntary activity. And I appreciate Senator Newman made notice that there was concerns about cybersecurity with this, and we appreciate that. And we share his concerns about cybersecurity. That's why in our public safety bill we have additional funding for the BCA to have additional safeguards on cybersecurity, and we'd appreciate any support we can get on that also, because that, given these days of Russian bots and hacks that are coming in, is very definitely something the Department of Public Safety is concerned about. Staying on the theme of security, this bill doesn't provide what we think is adequate funding for for installing security cameras at our DVS sites. We have had DVS drivers, examiners, and staff physically assaulted. Concussions have been sustained by state employees who were simply trying to make sure that somebody had passed their driver's test or not. And we think that the security cameras are a prudent step to provide additional security for state employees. In our original proposal, we did have funding in there for the deputy registers also. I'm not aware of the deputy registers having actual assaults. If they are, we certainly want to be supportive of the deputy registers also, but we have had physical assaults in Plymouth and in Arden Hills and in other places, and we want to make sure that we can give some protection to our state employees also. The bill does not, now this is my last sort of safety and security component of this, is it doesn't provide increased data auditing capacity, and we have seen in some cases deputy registers or other staff that are inappropriately looking at drivers' records. I know that privacy is something we all cherish, and nobody wants to have their personal information or their home address or their picture, as good a picture as the DVS is taking these days, nobody wants to have that just looked at for whatever reason somebody at an office might have. We think auditing to make sure that that's not happening makes sense. We think that's an additional safeguard that will keep people's private data private by giving the folks that have access to it an additional reason to think twice before they decide to run Prince's address and driver's license, which we saw done on a number of occasions. The DPS policy items that were not involved in, that were not included here, we had requested a change to allow school buses to be used in emergency situations like a flood evacuation. There was some concern, I know, raised by the school bus operators as to whether or not they would be compensated for that. I believe we have fixed that in the language, and we think this is good public policy, that when we have to get large numbers of people from point A to point B, and especially in greater Minnesota, where their school buses are probably the most accessible vehicle for doing that, we would like to have that allowed, and currently under state law, it is not allowed. It also does not provide for two provisions in pipeline safety. We get dinged every year by the feds because our state law doesn't match the federal law in terms of the maximum on fines. We almost never get to the maximum on fines, but simply having it in the law so that our law matches federal law would allow us to be consistent with our federal authorities. And we also think that having utility companies need to report the same way that pipeline companies do if they have a damage to a pipe. We think that also is prudent. There is a lot in this bill that we like. I know I've probably sounded pretty negative, but I want you to know, just as I started out on the positive, we think there's a lot in this bill that we do like. We are very happy to see the $5 million in extra money for fiscal year 23 and the $7 million 24 for the school bus camera program, keeping kids safe, and kids who are running across the street to get to that bus safe absolutely makes sense. We would like to make sure that the staff that administers the grants also will get funded. We appreciate the update to the salvage title laws that was mentioned earlier. That is absolutely the right direction to go. And the State Patrol Aviation request, once again, that aviation unit is money in the bank. We are doing great work with that, and we are very, very supportive of that. We would like the deficiency taken care of, but we are absolutely supportive of that. The last item I have is we know that from some recent federal fund increases that some changes to the commercial vehicle enforcement funding would allow us to access $5 million in additional federal funds. And finally, the last place I'll mention is an increase in the soft body armor reimbursement program. Now, there was a question as to why that is in transportation, and it is administered by the Commissioner's Office, which is appropriated out of transportation, and that's why it's there. The last time I checked, we had $12 in that account, which is not enough to buy any piece of body armor or even a scrap of it. And last night's incident in Roseville is just another grim reminder of the importance of providing soft body armor. And I can tell you that not only are police asking for soft body armor, but I'm having fire departments ask for soft body armor. I'm having EMS ask for soft body armor. So simply getting this up so that we can at least meet the current requests, we think is a prudent step in public safety. So I want to thank you once again for the opportunity to testify on the bill. And as I said, there are many, many things here, especially the things that Rick King has proposed in here that we are very, very supportive of. We are very happy to be here to support the bill. There are some items that we hope can be addressed, and we stand ready to answer questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrington. My apologies for making fun of your office yesterday when you were testifying. Public safety.
You should make fun of my office yesterday, and I tried to clean it up today, but I'm here now
You're here
in no small part because rather than have my office, which is only half cleaned, on display, I am much happier being here with this as the backdrop. So,
Love this view better. This is good.
Madam Chair, if I may respond very
Senator
briefly. Commissioner Harrington and I have been working pretty closely together now for a number of years, and I always listen to what he has to say, and I fully intend to continue to work with him as we move forward with this bill. I do want to just make very quick mention on a couple of items. The line of duty death issue is as he has described, is really a horrible situation. But that is, in my mind, not funding that falls within the jurisdiction of the Transportation Committee. I believe that falls within the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee, where DPS also is involved. The fee sharing issue that he mentioned, that is directly out of the King report. We are following in our bill Mr. King's recommendation. Data and racial profiling issue is kind of a difficult one. My concern there is twofold. Number one, the data is private and no doubt well-intentioned, but I am very concerned about data breaches, and it happens all the time. And secondly, the program itself is voluntary. And I'm no statistician, but I question whether or not it being voluntary will skew the end result of the study. School bus being used for emergency services. When I first saw that, I was really, really concerned because number one, it was mandatory. And number two, there was no compensation. I saw nothing in there that addressed issues concerning insurance or liability. So I was very uncomfortable with that provision. Doesn't mean that we can't continue to work on it in the future, but having the government have the ability to come in and literally mandate a school bus owner to have to submit to the use of his equipment with no compensation, no insurance, and none of that, I wasn't comfortable. Finally, soft body armor. There, once again, I believe what the Department of Public Safety is asking for is the transportation system to fund soft body armor for local law enforcement. If I'm incorrect on that, I will certainly listen. But last year, we provided sufficient funds for the state patrol that is within our jurisdiction to have the soft body armor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Newman. Those were, I'm glad you addressed, there was several of my own questions with those two. And we have Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, thank you. A couple, I guess a comment to you, Madam Chair, and I think it's a finance issue that has to be dealt with, and that's the deficiencies, not only with the DPS here. I'm not sure what Commissioner Harrington said the cost was. I believe the DNR also has a deficiency, and that comes from on standby for the potential of problems here on the Capitol complex as well. And I think maybe, on standby for the court hearings that happen down in the courthouse and the federal building. So there are some deficiencies here that need to be dealt with, and I'm not quite sure how you're going to move forward with that. Or Commissioner, do you have a price tag on the deficiency for security?
Commissioner Harrington.
Chair Rosen, Senator Ingebrigtsen, the current deficiency is 2.5 million from the State Patrol. We believe that will grow to 3.7 before the end of the fiscal year, but 2.5 million is where it is currently.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you. And so, and don't quote me on the DNR one. I thought it was 1.2, but as you know, they were as well geared up and ready to go when they were having troubles a couple of years ago. And the question I have, Commissioner, you ran through the racial profiling thing somewhat quick, at least for an old Norwegian to understand. So could you back up on that and tell me how you're going to do that with voluntarily? I'm not quite following that.
Commissioner Harrington.
Chair Rosen, Senator Ingebrigtsen, the process that we have studied, and the Office of Traffic Safety, Mike Hansen has helped do that, and we've looked at other models in other states. Connecticut is the one that comes the most readily to mind. They have asked citizens to voluntarily identify themselves in terms of race when they're renewing their driver's licenses. That data goes into a private data bank that is not accessible to law enforcement. It is not accessible to the deputy registers. It is a data source that could be studied, but is not going to be something that a cop can pull up on a MDT or pull up on their phone, or nor would the dispatcher be able to give it to you. So believe that answers the question that there was of whether or not then this could enhance racial profiling. So it'll be anonymous data that way. Once the data is collected and you have sufficient amounts of it, you then can look at by geographic area, by tags, because all of those things then go into the same system, to be able to see, is there any racial profiling or whether there is any racial animus or discriminatory action going on in the system. So it is a voluntary program. It is private data. And my understanding, and I also am not a statistician, sir, so I will admit that I can't give you that kind of detailed information on it. But other states are doing this, and they've been able to do it successfully, and they've been able to show really important, robust results, because in many cases, it proves the negative, that there was no racial animus or no racial discrimination involved. And in some cases, in Connecticut, I can recall, they found some areas where it was.
So just real quickly, and you and I go back a long ways in the law enforcement field, and you remember the racial profiling. I think they had some years ago, they actually did it during tagging, when people would get tickets, and I think it was filled out at that time, and I don't remember, it was a fairly significant form that was filled out. So wouldn't that be a better way of some indication that there's profiling going on versus, you're talking about at the DPS level, or the getting your driver's license level?
Senator Rosen, Senator Ingebrigtsen, I've worked in two departments that have done exactly what you described. And in St. Paul, we, at every traffic stop, would announce gender, race, whether we tagged and whether or not we did a search. The issue that we've struggled with is, how do I know what the race is actually of the person? So if I am stopping somebody who is from the Dominican Republic, are they African American? Are they African? Are they Latino? And the answer is, you're asking for a cop to guess at that point. And so the data wasn't as accurate as self-report data would be. And so this was a way to be able to get self-report data, which we believe would be the most accurate determiner of what the racial background of the driver was.
I'll talk to you offline.
Okay, I appreciate that, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. One is for Commissioner Harrington. Commissioner, this may be a little offbeat, but I recognize that your department does reconstruction of accidents, and so I want to know who funds those reconstruction reports, and when you are working on behalf of or in concert with a county, whether those counties have to reimburse you in any shape, form, or fashion for the work that you are funded for, if it's for work that you are funded for through the legislature.
Commissioner.
Senator Ingebrigtsen, Senator Champion, my understanding is that the State Patrol does those investigations and does not charge the local municipality or the local county for doing the accident reconstruction. We are trained to do that. We are recognized as one of the foremost experts in accident reconstruction in the state of Minnesota. And so when a local jurisdiction calls upon us, very similar to the way they call upon the BCA to come in and add their expertise to a crime scene or a crash scene that they are trying to determine fault in, the State Patrol does that and does it gratis, as I understand it.
Mr. Chair?
Follow up, please.
So it sounds like that when your expertise is called upon and it's to aid and abet the efforts of a county, that you all are used as an extension of the county's work, even though it's the area that you all work in. So that's what I believe that I'm hearing. And so I think that is a matter of concern that I will raise at some other time, and we should look at that from a budgetary perspective as well. Because if the State Patrol is being used as an expert for a county in order to prosecute or in some other shape, form, or fashion, then I think we should deal with that in real time. The second question that I have is for Senator Newman. This may be like a really simple question, but it's on page 85. of your bill. And I'm looking at 85.6 through 85.10. I just thought it was odd that there is a difference in Greater Minnesota's project size, being really clearly articulated, while no size distinction in the metro area. Is there any particular reason for that, or if there's something that I'm missing?
Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, Senator Champion, the area of the bill that you are looking at deals with the corridors of commerce provisions. And MnDOT came to us and wanted to make some changes to that program. And what you are looking at then is a proposed change to part of the corridors of commerce provision, and specifically in Greater Minnesota, there are lots of small projects that they never get to because they try for regional balance, metropolitan area versus outstate Minnesota. And they never get to some of them smaller projects because the bigger projects eat the money up before they get to them. In the metropolitan area, as I understand it, that same problem isn't present because most of the projects in the metropolitan area really are large projects. And so there is no small projects provision in the bill for the metro, but there is for outstate. And this is sort of I'll call it a compromise proposal between the Senate Transportation Committee and MnDOT. I can tell you that there is also within the corridors of commerce bill coming out of the House, a completely different proposal when it comes to the corridors program. So what you're looking at is just that. It's the corridors of commerce provision.
And Senator Champion.
Just a follow-up. So is this something that MnDOT has come up with, or who came up with this? Is because even if there wasn't a small project in the metropolitan area, it seems to me that there should be consistency and synergy, that if there's a small project in the metro area, then it should be, called a small metro project, because it's a small greater project, right? A Greater Minnesota project. So I just don't understand why there's that distinction, because then you remove the element of being able to see if the metropolitan area doesn't have or are not given small projects, while Greater Minnesota is. So I'm just trying to understand why there's that distinction, because it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. So thank you.
Senator Ingebrigtsen, did you want to reply to that?
No, not to that point, to the other point that Senator Champion made with regards to the reconstruction.
Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, in answer to Senator Champion's question, this proposal divvying up between Greater Minnesota and the metro, that's MnDOT's suggestion. And I don't know if Mr. Radin is he could maybe come forward and explain in a little bit more detail, but as I understand it, I know that there are small projects in Greater Minnesota, but not necessarily in the metropolitan area, and that's the reason for the division.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam
Please
Chair.
state your name.
I'm Eric Radin with MnDOT Government Affairs, and Senator Newman is correct. This was part of a department proposal to make some changes to the Corridors of Commerce program. And one of the challenges that we've had within the program was finding regional balance for projects in truly rural Minnesota. And so we went out and talked to the area transportation partnerships in Greater Minnesota. And this recommendation came out of that process, again, as a way to help us get to those projects that are really struggling to compete with larger, higher volume projects that are closer to the metro area. And so as a way to try to achieve regional balance throughout the state, this concept would create a small projects category in greater Minnesota. But I think it's important to recognize that within the overall Corridors of Commerce program, the funds would still be split about half and half between the metropolitan area and greater Minnesota. It's just how those funds would be spent within greater Minnesota. Some of them could be spent in this new small projects category.
Senator Champion?
Madam Chair, thank you. So to the testifier, did you talk to anyone in the metropolitan area when you look at the regional balance in order to make sure that you are clearly articulating the size of the project in the metropolitan area?
Mr. Radin?
Madam Chair and Senator Champion, yes, we have talked to the Metropolitan Council as well as the counties in the Twin Cities Metropolitan District, MnDOT Metro District, and I think as Senator Newman also stated, it's really a matter of those projects within the metro region that really just have a higher dollar amount. It's, you know, most of the projects that would compete in the Corridors of Commerce program are going to be the more expensive multi-million-dollar projects that are going to be well over that $10 million threshold.
And last, Madam Chair, just a statement more than anything. It seems to me that this doesn't quite pass the rub test as far as I'm concerned when you think in terms of having clarity in the Corridors of Commerce in order to make the distinction around how much money is being spent. Then I could understand the bifurcation between small and large, but I don't understand the regional notion of just having an all-encompass title for one, but bifurcating it in some other area where it doesn't clearly distinguish for us whether the metropolitan project was small or large, as opposed to just saying the majority, if not all of the projects in the metropolitan area are large. That just doesn't seem right when we think in terms of balance, clarity, and transparency. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Thank you, Mr. Radin.
Madam Chair.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, with regards to Senator Champion's point with regards to traffic reconstruction, from my experience in running the Sheriff's Department and working very closely with the State Patrol as well as the DNR, State Patrol would do reconstruction. That came online probably about midway to my latter career as a young deputy. And it was always a given, and I think Commissioner Harrington will agree that working together means that those kinds of reconstruction episodes would be for counties as well, and in cooperation with, obviously, you're talking about the expense. The sheriff also was in control or in charge of housing prisoners for the State Patrol. So that thing never just went, it just, it's just a cooperation thing that always went on. But I do know that the reconstruction experts, if they're called in while off duty, their expertise then I think is, I think they may be reimbursed the state for that. Maybe Senator Newman knows that. But if it's an accident that's a civil matter, the state gets reimbursed for that expertise. But cooperation is where it was, at least when I was there.
Very good. Thank you. We have, I don't see any other questions, so we have Transportation Commissioner Daubenberger. Did I say that right? Please come up. Oh, and members, we have to recess at 2:50 because of floor session. I don't know if you need more time than that, Commissioner? Are you good?
I can be fast.
Because we can certainly wait till later, too. Okay. Welcome to the committee. And hold that microphone close. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, for the opportunity to provide comments on the Omnibus Transportation Bill. My name for the record is Nancy Daubenberger, and I am the Interim Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Transportation. You have a letter outlining our concerns in more detail, so I will just highlight several of the issues of concern as well as items we support and appreciate. We do appreciate the bill's inclusion of several items from our governor's policy and budget proposals, including funding for small cities, allowing the installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure at certain rest areas, and appropriations for operations and maintenance. We are also pleased to see the inclusion of changes to the Corridors of Commerce program. However, the significant Trunk Highway Fund base increase for Corridors of Commerce reduces resources available for other planned MnDOT projects. Additionally, the Metropolitan Council should have a role in screening metro area projects, as they are federally designated the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Twin Cities region. There are several provisions that provide funding to enhance Minnesota's transportation infrastructure, including Trunk Highway Budget Authority to access federal funds provided under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. While we appreciate the IIJA matching funds for many of the modes, including Greater Minnesota Transit, aeronautics, and other discretionary funds, there are several restrictions on how those funds can be used. Unfortunately, the bill prohibits expending federal funds except by direct appropriation and eliminates the existing process for spending federal funds under the Legislative Advisory Commission. This restricts MnDOT's ability to access federal funds, which could negatively impact communities across the state. There are no corresponding direct appropriations in this bill that would allow us to spend the anticipated federal funds, which under current law are authorized via statutory appropriations. This bill also does not provide funding for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, instead putting in place several restrictions on how the federal funds can be used for EV charging. The bill prohibits MnDOT from funding the Reconnect Rondo project in St. Paul, even with funds already appropriated by the legislature. This important project seeks to address past injustices from the construction of Interstate 94 and has already been recognized at the federal level as a project that will likely compete well for IIJA grant opportunities. Trunk highway earmarks in the bill divert resources from projects that have been identified through an objective planning process. Earmarks can negatively impact fairness in project selection and funding. The bill includes more than 20 earmarks, and these earmarks utilize almost all existing trunk highway bond capacity. You should have a copy of the letter from past Transportation Committee chairs providing additional detail regarding concerns with earmarking. We have additional concerns with the changes to the pavement life cycle cost analysis. The current process allows MnDOT to select pavement types based on factors like constructability, continuity of pavement type, traffic control, and effect on businesses. Our recommendation is to direct the department to work with stakeholders and industry partners to study issues related to pavement selection and report back to the legislature with consensus recommendations for changes to the process. Several MnDOT agency initiatives were not included in the bill, including those related to Indian employment preference, climate funding, and the Allied Radio Matrix for Emergency Response, or ARMOR, statewide radio communication system, utility aircraft, and operating funds for the second daily train to Chicago. The bill does not account for increased debt service costs from the proposed $300 million of additional trunk highway bonds. The bill also does not include increases for program planning and delivery or agency services, including operating pressures. These activities are essential to plan, deliver, and manage the additional federal funds coming to Minnesota from the bipartisan infrastructure law. Thank you for the opportunity to share MnDOT's perspective on the omnibus transportation bill. We look forward to working with you to address these issues as the bill progresses through the legislative process, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I do want to just maybe perhaps correct you on the debt service. We did correct that in the A48 amendment that was adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Newman, or any questions for the Commissioner?
If I may, just
Senator
very
Newman,
briefly.
please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, on the debt service. Yes, we did correct that, and I suspect that the Commissioner wasn't aware of it. On the issue of the direct appropriation by the legislature, I candidly believe that it's a good idea to have the legislature involved. The IIJA funds that are coming is a significant amount of money, probably a once-in-a-lifetime event. And I'm simply trying to follow the Constitution that says that any money spent, including federal money by statute, goes into the state treasury, is appropriated. And I think that it's entirely reasonable to include the legislature in the spending of that money. Many times, and in many of the discretionary grants, we don't yet even know what is going to be proposed. The issue of earmarks. This is something that I have been very, very involved with in MnDOT for a number of years now, and have been because I believe our constituents have a right of meaningful input in project selection. And MnDOT does not want us to do that. Consequently, they call them earmarks. I call them community requests or constituent requests. For a long time at the federal level, and I believe maybe MnDOT picked up on this, for a long time at the federal level, they were absolutely prohibited. There were no earmarks. That has all changed and is in the process of changing. And in point of fact, there are a number of federal earmarks coming to the state of Minnesota where projects have in fact been earmarked. The Capital Investment Committee is nothing but one big earmark, or at least has been for many, many years. If MnDOT would simply let us become involved in a meaningful way in the project selection process that I believe our constituents are being locked out of, then I think maybe the battle would be a little bit easier. But until that happens, I am going to continue to push for these earmarks because I want my constituents, the ones that I think know the best when it comes to what roads have to be repaired, improved, expanded. I think they know at least as best as the folks in MnDOT. Maybe not how to do it, but they know where those roads are that need addressing. So I will continue, Madam Chair, to include earmarks in my bill.
Thank you, Senator Newman. Commissioner, could you stay for a little bit? We just have to close down session, and I believe we can probably stay, but we do need to go into recess at this point. To order. I think I'd like to have Ms. Boyd come up and just go through a few of the reconsiderations on the spreadsheet. Thank you, Alice. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I was in a side conversation. Yes, Madam Chair, Mr. Nauman and I conferred about that issue, and I went through the bill again, and thankfully, I was confident about that one, but the bill is correct, so we don't have to make any amendments. There is an error in the spreadsheet. So when you fill in that error, and I can point it out to you if you'd like.
Yes, please.
We're looking at page 2 of the spreadsheet. And I apologize, somewhere it got dropped off. And this would correspond to page
20?
20, I believe, of the bill. Page 20 of the bill are the appropriations for the federal match for local roads for county state aid and municipal state aid. These are on lines 20.5 and 20.6. And all that happened in the spreadsheet was the fiscal year 22 numbers dropped off somewhere along the way. So when you add those amounts back in, the 24.896 for county and 6.54 for municipal, that adds up to the difference that Mr. Nauman and I were finding. So we should be all good.
Okay. Any questions on that? Thank you very much, Ms. Boyd. And Mr. Nauman, yes.
No, Madam Chair, I was just going to concur that those numbers
Great.
work.
Any further questions for the Commissioner? Senator Kemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, so just reflecting on a few things you said, making sure I've got it. So with the IIJA funds, a lot of these are through grants, right? And so this is a competitive grant process that Minnesota is hoping to get as many of these dollars as we possibly can. One of the things that I've heard expressed as a concern is that some of the limitations that this bill puts on various forms of those grants will hinder our competitiveness, because other states are going to come in and say, yep, we've got this flexibility to do whatever, and we can make this work. Is that your take on what we might be doing, leaving ourselves in that position?
Commissioner Daubenberger.
Madam Chair, Senator Kent, thank you for that question. Yes, that does describe the concern, is if MnDOT needs to have that direct appropriation for going after competitive grant funds, then yes, we lose that flexibility to have that in place as we're going after that, to be able to show that we've secured or we have additional dollars that the state is putting forth to compete for those grants.
Thank
Senator
you.
Kent.
Thank you, and Madam Chair, and as a follow-up, and that also includes some of the electric vehicle infrastructure aspects of the IIJA funding as well. Is that true?
Commissioner Daubenberger.
Madam Chair and Senator Kent, yes, that's true.
Thank you.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure if it's a question for the commissioner, but it was part of the discussion that Commissioner and Senator Newman were having earlier about earmarks. And I guess the one point I'd make about it is I know Congress is getting back into that mode. I don't think it's a good one. And Senator Newman, you say your constituents, you're listening to your constituents well. I don't know. It looks like most of the earmarks in here are those that happen to be in majority party districts. The Senate's almost half and half. I know it's not quite half and half, but that it tends to be in any party, whoever's making earmarks, it tends to be the people they're hearing from the most in their districts. I don't want our job as senators to be finding out how we can prioritize our constituents at the expense of more worthy projects elsewhere. And so I guess the fact that it's done in Congress doesn't make it a good idea. The fact that it's done here isn't a good idea. And I understand you're trying to see what you're hearing from your constituents. My constituents drive on the roads around our area. They're not driving out in your communities. They're not driving there. They don't have the ability to see how projects fit in and what's most priority and so on. And so if the legislature was better at allocating them in a fair means, I'd understand that, but I just think the reality is when you have a majority of either party, whoever's in charge, tends to have the projects come up in their districts. And frankly, it tends to come up more in the districts of people who in their party who are more at risk of losing elections. That just seems to be what I've seen over the years, and I understand why people like earmarks, but I don't think it's a good way to prioritize state funding. And I guess it's more a comment than a question, but I welcome a response from either you or the commissioner, because I don't think that's the way we make the best choices. And it's not that the legislature's got poor judgment. It's that we're hearing from certain people, and they're not people trying to look at the overall best interests of the overall public and trying to balance those interests.
Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, Senator Marty, good thoughts, good comments, but I will respond as follows. At the beginning of the session, I sent out, I believe, 2 emails to every member of the Senate, not just the Republicans, every member of the Senate. And I asked them, if you have a project, an infrastructure project, road, bridge, whatever, in your district, drop a bill and get that information to me, because I intend, to the best of my ability, put constituent requests into the bill. I will tell you, Senator Marty, that it was never my intention to target Republicans or target or exclude Democrats. What I have tried to do is pick out the legitimate road projects, bridge projects in the state of Minnesota that are good for the state of Minnesota. And I will guarantee you, Senator Marty, that some of the projects in this bill involve folks from the other side of the aisle. And when I did this, I didn't look at redistricting. I just let the cards fall where they may. So at least as far as I am concerned, I think I got a pretty clear conscience. I'm not trying to pick winners or losers within your party or mine. What I am trying to do is provide some type of a mechanism so that the people in Minnesota have an active, meaningful input into project selection by MnDOT. And MnDOT has been extraordinarily resistant to that, to the point where, you know, it feels sometimes when I finally get one, it's like a tooth extraction. I simply am trying to find a way for the people that we represent and for legislators to be in a position to influence the decisions made by MnDOT. I don't think a state agency should both have all of the money and all of the decision-making authority. I think the legislature should much more actively participate. I acknowledge what you're saying from a political standpoint, but at least from my standpoint, Senator Marty, that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Senator
And Madam Chair, thank you for that answer, and I don't doubt that you're trying to be fair. I would care to venture that proportionally the number of projects going by party in this bill, I'm guessing, I haven't checked, in this bill or in any bills in the past, the majority party of either party tends to have them prioritized that way. And if the problem is that we think MnDOT is a poor process for it, try and work out a better process so that people who are looking at the entire system, trying to figure out where the most urgent needs are, and that we poke them and say, hey, you guys, this is an urgency and so on. But to me, I don't have a way of doing it. I have different communities in my district, and hey, am I supposed to, I'm not, never served on your committee. I'm not the one who's able to go out there and say, you know, this project, because the people in this community are pushing harder than the neighboring community, it's a more urgent project. So I'm not accusing you of trying to do things in an unfair manner. I'm saying the reality is, I don't think it comes out fair, and I care to venture that if you look at where all these projects are, that the vast majority of them happen to fall into majority party districts. And I think if you look back 10 years, 30 years, whenever we have earmarks, it tends to be that way. And I think that's just the reality. And I don't think that's a fair way, even if your intention is good.
Commissioner, would you like to answer, Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Marty. If I may, I would just like to mention that when I was providing a little testimony on that part of the bill, it was referencing MnDOT's fair and objective planning process, programming process for projects. Just wanted to mention that MnDOT does have a project selection process that was, it was actually required by the legislature, but we've worked over the years to set up criteria to score projects so that there is a prioritization process. And the opportunity for the public, for our stakeholders to provide input to us on projects. Typically, most of that takes place, I would say, when our districts, the 8 districts within MnDOT, are working with their area transportation partnerships to talk through the updates to the statewide transportation improvement plan. And so that's our 4-year program of projects. There's also our 10-year plan and then our long-range plan that we update every 5 years as well. And those are other opportunities to hear from the public, get that engagement on what's important in our transportation investments. So those are just some opportunities for public to have input on our project selection.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, I'll give you one example as to why I don't think the project selection process just described by the Commissioner is working as well as it possibly could. And yes, there is a 4-year STIP plan. Yes, there is a 10-year plan. There is a long-term plan. But as an example, last year I was rather insistent that Highway 212 in Carver County get completed and complete that as a 4-lane highway. There's only Highway 94 going west out of the Twin Cities and Highway 212 that are 4-lane highways. The people in Carver County have been talking to MnDOT for 60 years. 60 years. And that road was not on their 4-year plan. And that is a road where multiple fatalities, an economic corridor coming from western Minnesota into the metropolitan area, and we could not get MnDOT to listen. I wish, Senator Marty, there was a way to accomplish it without doing what I am doing, but I am on purpose. I am poking MnDOT. I want them to listen to us. And from my experience being on the Transportation Committee, yes, they listen, but is it meaningful? And I am being critical of MnDOT from that standpoint. I want them to listen to us. So this is a discussion that we will have, and it will be ongoing. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to back off. And I am going to do the best that I can for people throughout the state of Minnesota to have MnDOT look at their projects and listen to them, be it in the metropolitan area that's controlled by the Democrats or rural Minnesota that is controlled by the Republicans.
Senator Newman, we just had that discussion about community request or serving your district or a constituent needs. And that is something why they sent us here, is for that very issue. And I remember the good old, not the good old days, but I served in the minority, 12 years. And if one of my projects was in a bill or one of my bills was in the spreadsheet, you voted for it. Back when I started as a freshman, that was the rule of thumb. You voted for that because you didn't know what it was going to happen when it came back. So I think you have a fair bill, and I truly believe that the legislature does have the authority constitutionally to direct funds out of the state treasury, bar none. Senator Marty, did you have a reply? No? I'm sorry. Senator Kent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, you're talking about the scoring system. Is, for lack of a better word, shovel readiness part of that equation?
Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Kent. Yes, in fact, if I think about the IIJA bill, for instance, when it comes to the competitive process, that is certainly a time where we look at projects that would be ready based on the criteria that comes out in the notice of funding opportunity. So if money needs to be authorized by a certain point, spent by a certain point, shovel readiness would certainly enter into that. When it comes to our regular program, so we're planning projects quite a ways out and no expectation on shovel readiness when they're out, but then they work their way through the 10-year plan, and we make sure they're scoped adequately before putting them in the 4-year program. And so they're not shovel ready going into the 4-year program, not typically anyway, but it's over those 4 years of the program then that we're developing them to get them shovel ready.
And
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for explaining that way better than I could ever. And that to me is one of the concerns. And I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with most of the individual projects that are in this list. But I know, for example, when we did our bonding bill a couple of years ago, there were a number of projects that were in there that were nowhere near ready for actual construction. And we are then earmarking money and holding it aside for a project that it may take a while, and I know that's bonding, and that's not exactly not what we're talking about today. But are the projects, Senator Newman or Commissioner, that are in this list, are they going to be ready to go, or are we going to be parking this money for projects when there are other things that we could be using those funds on right away?
Senator Newman?
The projects that are in this list are lists of projects that I have received requests from various senators. I will not represent to you that they are shovel-ready. I will represent to you that they are projects that legislators have come forward with, saying that they, I am not suggesting that the legislature be the sole determiner of these projects. I am suggesting that MnDOT ought to work with us, in a better manner, so that we can get projects that are important to people in the state of Minnesota advanced more quickly. In some respects, I look at it like a partnership. And MnDOT has been extraordinarily resistant to the earmark idea. And I don't think they should be so resistant. I think they should work with us and acknowledge. You take a highway like 212 or 14 down in southern Minnesota. Absolutely had to be fixed. And the only reason it got done is because we were so insistent. So I would sincerely appreciate a situation where MnDOT and the legislature can work together better and have a better process. Yes, they have a selection process, but we, the legislature, are almost entirely excluded from it, and that's what I'm objecting to.
Thank you. Good. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. I see no more questions, and we're going to go to amendments. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we have amendments. Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't sure if Met Council was going to be testifying.
I don't see.
No.
Are we good?
I got a wave no.
Okay, he's here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to offer to move the A41 amendment, please.
Senator Kent moves the A41 amendment.
Do you know what this is?
Senator Kent to the A41.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee will be familiar with a theme here from an earlier bill today, and that has to do with federal funds and making those available to our local jurisdictions. The A41 amendment provides matching funds for IIJA matching funds for local units of government, establishes priorities and values, and includes technical assistance. This is a way we can support our local units of government and make sure that we are setting up all parts of Minnesota to receive the benefit of this federal commitment that has been made. We'd rather have it in our small towns and counties and communities and not in other states around the country.
Thank you, Senator Kent. We'll give Senator Newman a chance to take a look at this.
I believe, Madam Chair, that this is proposing to have the state put up the local match money for federal discretionary or competitive grants. Am I correct on that?
Senator Kent?
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Madam Chair. On that basis, I would oppose the A41 amendment.
Any further comments or questions? Okay. Senator Kent renews her motion on the A41 amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
No?
Motion does not prevail. Further amendments? Senator Kent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to offer the to move the A40 amendment.
Senator Kent moves the A40 amendment.
This is proper verbiage. Does not need to show.
Senator Kent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that we all understand is that our way of fueling our vehicles is changing, and it will be changing even more rapidly in the years to come. And we all recognize that the gas tax is going to have a different role, and electric vehicles are going to play a bigger role. The Constitution specifically dedicates funds through fuel, for lack of a better word, to the purposes of maintaining our roads and highways and bridges. And one of the challenges, and we've got a provision in this bill that is a surcharge for people with electric vehicles, it misses the same user fee nature of the gas tax, because the gas tax is mileage-based. That is one of the three main funding sources that are not, other two are not mileage-based. And so they together make a good balanced approach to funding our transportation system. Knowing this is going to change, we've seen a number of bills over the years that propose a tax here, a surcharge there, but they're flat. They miss the mileage-based, the use-based nature of the current gas tax. What this amendment does is it says, let's stop, let's do a pilot program, let's study how it would work with electric vehicles. For example, one of the concerns that I share, and I know many Minnesotans will share, because a lot of Minnesotans have concerns about, and properly about, data privacy, is people may be not comfortable with having their mileage and activities in their car tracked everywhere they go. Well, different states have piloted different ideas that allow people who have that belief to select an optional way of making their contributions. And so the point is, rather than a handful of legislators sitting around the table saying, we think this is a good idea, let's try it, let's have the conversations, let's talk about balancing the various needs from communities around the state. And that is what this, the mileage-based user fee pilot program would create.
Thank you, Senator Kent. I do have a question. I'm not sure if this was seen in transportation. I know the mileage-based user fee has been around for a while, the concept, and your objectives, but your criteria doesn't really segment or peel or designate the difference between Greater Minnesota and the Metro, because the mileage-based user fee would be horrible for Greater Minnesota. You drive half an hour, 45 hour to get to work one way. And that you can probably make the same argument in the Metro a little bit, but not really. I mean, we have food deserts. We have, grocery stores that are 30, 40 minutes away. So my question is, there is nothing in here to substantiate the difference between Greater Minnesota and the Metro. And my second question would be, you take it from the general fund, but isn't this something that perhaps the IIJA could fund?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure if IIJA funds would be available for this type of a program. That's a great question, and if it were, we could certainly stipulate that as a part of it. I would also be very happy to include considerations about Greater Minnesota versus the Metro. The one thing, again, I will reiterate, the idea is that electricity will be replacing gasoline as the way we fuel most of our vehicles over time. And right now, gasoline is basically a mileage-based user fee, because you drive a more or less fuel-efficient vehicle, you drive more or fewer miles, you pay more or less for your gas and obviously in the gas tax. And so, again, in the context of how we currently, through the three major streams of gas tax, registration, and sales tax, this creates a balance so that there's the flat nature of the fee, of the taxes and the registration fees. But then this part of this one component is mileage-based. But these are the kinds of conversations that should be held in the context of this kind of pilot program so that we can evaluate the results and have a much more informed process moving ahead as we do. We know the major car manufacturers have already announced that they are going to be switching their entire fleets in the coming years to electric vehicles. This is an intelligent, thoughtful, careful, considered way to evaluate what we should be doing as a state moving forward, recognizing there's only one Minnesota, and we need to think about the distances that our residents travel, the very nature of a highway and road system that works around all our beautiful lakes, and be real in the climate we live in. I mean, we need to think about these things, but this is the kind of an opportunity that this pilot program would create for us to do that.
Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, as Senator Kent knows, I opposed this amendment yesterday. I will oppose it again today, in part because of the reasons that the chair pointed out, but in addition, this proposal involving mileage-based user fee is simply one of many potential suggestions to solve the much greater problem or question of how do we fund our transportation system. And by system, I mean roads, bridges, transit, ports, freight rail. It's all one part of one big system. How do we fund all of that? This is an idea that I think is worthy of discussing, but so is weight-based fees. The one thing I do like in the bill is down on line 1.27, the advisory panel of stakeholders. That's what really should occur here.
Right.
Is an advisory panel, and I don't think you need legislation to do it. You just get stakeholders involved that can discuss the greater question that I've mentioned, and then come back to the legislature with some recommendations. But for all of those reasons, Madam Chair, I would oppose the A40.
Senator Kent. And when we do eventually work on that advisory panel of stakeholders, make it very diverse to represent the entire state, I'm not sure if I can get down to my Senate district with an electric vehicle right now. Can I? 2.5 hours, 3 hours away?
Depends on which one you buy. There's one out there that goes about 250 miles, I think.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, Senator Newman, right now you said it's a fee per unit fee right now?
I'm sorry?
Per unit fee right now is being charged for electric vehicles? Is that how it's set up now?
There's a fee, currently it's $75 on each electric vehicle, which is a fee in lieu of the gas tax. And that, of course, is one of the issues that has to be resolved, is electricity is a method of propelling a motor vehicle, and under the Constitution, it is taxable. But we simply haven't gotten to the point where we can figure out how to capture that and get that money into the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund.
Senator Kent renews her motion on the A40 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
No.
Motion does not prevail. Senator Marty, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have based on Senator Kent's last amendment, I'm going to offer the A42 amendment.
Senator Marty moves the A42 amendment, and it is posted.
And Madam Chair, on the amendment, first of all, it deletes the the restrictions on the EV infrastructure grants and the fact that you cap it at no more than 25% can be spent on rest area projects and so on. But instead suggests that we ought to create an infrastructure deployment plan where we plan ahead how we do this, because a lot of these stations are going to be placed in effect very quickly. And this does delete the fee increases. I see round numbers are like $25, $50, $75, but how we came up with $229 for one here. It's as if somebody had some scientific method of plugging those numbers in. And the numbers I saw, I haven't looked in the last 2 years or so, but that the higher cost of electric vehicles and so on, that the fees they were paying for them were sufficient to more than make up for the loss of road revenue from loss of gas tax on them. So the $75 one, I think that was arbitrary, and this one seems to be arbitrary as well. So we delete those fee increases and start planning a deployment plan. And I think when I was hearing, I didn't comment on it, but when Senator Rosen, you mentioned the higher traveling distances for people in greater Minnesota, which also means more road needs. And I, as a Metro legislator, have always supported bulk of the funding, the formula that I think is very generous to greater Minnesota. But I also think that the issue that you mentioned in response to Senator Kent's thing should be something we should be looking at, and we're not doing it. Saying, well, we should have a stakeholder group or we should have a pilot project, but we're not ready for this one. Then we shouldn't be putting all these arbitrary fee increases in here either. And I think this is a time when we really need to be moving forward on electric vehicle infrastructure. It's happening very quickly. A couple of years ago, we had a lot of dealers saying they didn't want electric vehicles. Now a lot of them can't get them the ones they need. And so I believe we have to recognize this move is going forward, and we ought to be planning for it instead of just doing nothing other than increasing fees on the vehicles. $229 strikes me as purely random. No study, no anything. It's just, well, we'll plug in $229. And I think that that's excessive. I don't think it's fair. And I urge your support for this amendment and ask for a roll call on this one.
Senator Murray, thank you. Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, Senator Marty, I will oppose the A42 amendment. The plan that is outlined in 1.1, I'm sorry, 1.4 through 1.11 is one possible plan. I will tell you that in the bill on page 22 of the bill itself, there is a requirement for, a much broader requirement for any plans to be submitted have to come to the legislature. So presumably, that is already included in the much broader language in the bill itself. As far as the fee is concerned, over and over again, we hear that, it's not fair to place a fee on an electric vehicle, and I just disagree. Right now, folks who drive an electric vehicle pay a total of $75 a year in lieu of a gas tax. The $229 figure, or fee, I should say, that's currently in our bill, that came from MnDOT as the average amount that folks pay on a gas tax during the course of a year. And so we plugged that number in. I really disagree that folks who drive an electric vehicle should be excused from having to pay their share of the gas tax equivalent. The Constitution says any substance that propels a motor vehicle is taxable, and they aren't paying that tax. I've heard the argument that Electric vehicles are more expensive, therefore they should be excused from having to pay the gas tax equivalent because they're paying so much more in the sales tax. And by that same logic, if you drive a really, really expensive automobile, you should also be excused from having to pay for that gas tax equivalent, like a Maserati or a Bentley. So, you know, I think it's kind of unfortunate that we are having this contest as to whether or not folks who drive an electric vehicle should have to pay a gas tax equivalent. I think it's unfortunate because it's sort of pitting us against one another, when in point of fact, you don't have to stretch very hard to realize if you're going to drive an electric vehicle, you're on the road, you got to help pay for them just like anybody else. And so I really don't understand the opposition to that, paying a gas tax equivalent. And I think that fee will drop away once we have the ability to meter and capture the amount of money that is being determined when we meter the electricity being used in transportation and then dump that money into HUTDF. But until that happens, electric vehicles are coming and they're coming fast, and we have to do something to protect that gas tax. So I would oppose the 42.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just, for the record, point out that it's not, a Maserati is not the same as the smaller electrical vehicles. It's about the comparable vehicle, that a comparable vehicle that is an electric vehicle or a hybrid costs more than its comparable fuel-based engine vehicle. So it's not an apples and apples comparison. So they pay for it as a part of their sales tax. They pay for it as a part of their registration tab fees on an ongoing basis. And I am going to object to the characterization that nobody agrees that we should include this in how we that people who are using electricity to fuel their vehicles should not have to pay into it. It's a matter of how, as you described. And that's why I believe we need some sort of process to analyze this and to look into it. And if it's not the mileage-based user fee pilot program, let's create another process to exactly study these issues and take in stakeholder input and come up with some plans to start doing that. So, because you're exactly right, this is happening. Again, the automobile manufacturers around the world and here in the United States of America have already identified that they are going to convert to a fully electric vehicle fleets by a certain time. Was everybody else just amazed by the electric F-150? As a former Texas resident, I thought that was pretty darn cool. It's happening, you know? And so, but we're stuck in this position of we're just going to throw out a solution. What we should do is, and we should have been doing this several years ago, and in my amendment that I just previously offered has been a bill that Senator Lopez Franzen has had for several years. It's gotten no traction, and if people don't like that exact formulation of it, let's come up with a different way. But instead we just keep throwing solutions at the wall, and we need to be more thoughtful about it, and that's my entire point. And in lieu of that, I fully support Senator Marty's A42 amendment, and I will just add one more, to me, the most important part of this. As we think about the future of Minnesota and our vitality as a state, competitively, economically, physical health-wise, electric vehicles are a huge part of that, and it has to do with competitiveness. And states are stepping up to EV infrastructure. And my concern is that we're doing a fee, we're not doing the investment in what really is going to make us a much more vital state. And what the A42 amendment would do is put us back on track to be as vital and successful as we can be with electric vehicles, which will be a part of our future.
Senator Marty.
And Madam Chair, I want to second something that Senator Kent mentioned earlier when Senator Newman, when you suggested that some of us don't think electric vehicles should pay their share. Nobody's saying that. We're saying let's do it in a fair manner. And there are other provisions of here. We have, I don't know what it is, I think close to $70 million in federal infrastructure funds for EV charging stations that you're putting in here. The language we're striking out of here would prohibit any state funds from being used for that. Does that put it in jeopardy that we don't get that $70 million for this? Texas, other states like that are going ahead and plowing forward with their plans on this, and you're trying to block us from getting that federal funding. I think that this is a step backwards for electric vehicles. It's not a step forward for our roads or anything like that. And I just believe if we're seriously going to look at the direction we're headed, and you acknowledge we're moving towards electric vehicles, and we ought to be addressing it. And here it basically says you can't use, I mean, if we need, I don't know what the match is, if it's 20%, 25% or whatever we have to do to get the EV charging station dollars from the federal funds, but by blocking state sources from it, by putting all the requirements in here you're doing to block it, it's basically saying we're going to, good chance we'll forfeit that $70 million. And so to me, this strikes me as just anti-electric vehicle, not a thoughtful plan on how we're going to fund our roads. And again, I agree electric vehicles have to pay their share, but I think that's why we need to do a study. If you don't like the one Senator Kent's doing, why isn't there another one proposed? But I think this is very short-sighted anti-electric vehicle step, and urge your support for the amendment to strip that out and put in a logical plan that will help us get the federal funds.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Senator Newman, comments, or would you like me to take a vote? Okay. The roll call has been requested. Ms. Johnson, will you take the roll, please?
Chair Rosen,
Chair votes no.
Vice Chair Ingebrigtsen,
No.
Senator Marty,
Yes.
Senator Benson, Senator Champion,
Yeah.
Senator Johnson,
No.
Senator Kent,
Yes.
Senator Kiffmeyer,
No.
Senator Lopez Franzen, Senator Pratt,
No.
Senator Benson, and Senator Lopez Franzen.
There being 3 ayes and 5 noes, the A42 is not amended. Senator Newman, sometimes I asked Mr. Nauman if I should say this, but once in a while, it'd be nice to have a EV vehicle, because downstairs you can get a free charge in our parking lot.
I think that we just heard of a memo today, the EV charging in this building, I think the monthly fee is $50.
Oh,
Just
okay,
came.
there is a fee charge. I did not know that. Is that
Madam
new,
Chair.
or
Now,
is that an increase?
I don't know who gets that money. I don't believe it's HUTDF, but there's a $50
We
fee.
should grab that.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Johnson.
I think that was my bill that fixed that last year, so I just want to get that on the record, so.
Was it seriously? Yeah, oh, I'll be talking. Okay, Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move the A46 amendment, please.
Senator Kent moves the A46 amendment. We don't have that at this time. Senator Kent.
Which one?
Senator Kent to the A46.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as I described about the issue surrounding our electric vehicles and their role in a vital future Minnesota, this is comparable for transit and passenger rail. Again, it has to do with Minnesota's competitiveness and what employers are looking for, what companies as they relocate are looking for, what people and who are moving here, or people. I told a story in committee yesterday about a constituent who
This goes to transit.
in middle age received a diagnosis that meant she could no longer drive. And she doesn't live very far from St. Paul where she works, but she didn't have a way to get to work. And she's not alone. And there are a lot of people, whether for health or economic reasons, cannot have access to a passenger vehicle. So this bill sets back transit and passenger rail in a number of different ways. And what this amendment does is remove those parts of the bill and strengthens a number of provisions that would help us, for example, with the IIJA match. It would eliminate the transit prohibitions in greater Minnesota on the IIJA match for guideways. It would eliminate the $10 million cut to Metro Transit. It would add operating funds for the second daily train from Chicago. It would reallocate the sales tax on auto parts to include Metro Transit and Greater Metro Transit, and it would delete all of the restrictions and changes to Metro Transit finance, planning, construction, ownership, and operating policies, and the other provisions that target guideways. I will specifically say on the issue of guideways, which have been singled out, and I will appreciate that the line that will be running through my community has been carved out, but guideways matter. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about light rail, but the Gold Line is a bus line. It is a bus line in a dedicated guideway. It was created through a very careful process that I've had the privilege of watching for a lot of years, even before I ever got elected to this, because my brother-in-law used to be president of the Woodbury Chamber, and he was really fascinated with this. And when we talk about what brothers-in-law discuss at Thanksgiving dinner, that's what I used to hear about. And there was a very careful and methodical cost-benefit analysis inherent in the locally preferred alternative process, which is something that this bill tries to add into the mix. It already happens. And one of the things that is so clear from places around the country that have already brought in, whether it's the bus rapid transit in a dedicated guideway or light rail, developers go where there is permanent infrastructure. And I was with someone from my county just the other day who has worked on this project for a long time, and she specifically referenced that. If you just put up a bus stop and a sign, a developer's not going to put up a business park there or an apartment building, because you can just move that really easily. But when it's permanent infrastructure, the development comes. And I will point to my community. Shovels will go in the ground, we believe, next year. We're expecting good news from the federal government very soon about the Gold Line, and should be up and running in 2025. And already there is a place where the line comes across 694. It runs along 94 out east to Woodbury. And when it crosses 694, just north of 94, there is an area that there's a bit of a business park that has been built there, but the rest of it, they had put out the streets and the curbs and all the water systems and everything, and then the Great Recession hit. And that land has sat there waiting. And now apartments are going in and the businesses are going in because they know what's coming. So guideways make a difference. They are not just a nice to have sort of thing. They make a difference in a lot of different ways. And that is why I think that the provisions in the bill are not healthy. And again, I go back to what is good for Minnesota in the long run. And in my view, and I think in the view of an awful lot of people and in the experience of many communities and states around the country, healthy transit and passenger rail is part of a healthy economic, business, individuals' ability to get around, get customers around, seek out jobs and healthcare and education. We know that access to affordable transportation is the #1 predictor of economic mobility for Americans, from a very important Harvard study that was done several years ago. That is the American dream. And too many people right now in our state don't have that option if they can't afford to own and operate 1 or 2 vehicles, depending on their family makeup. And making sure that we are supporting transit across the state. It is not just a metro issue, and passenger rail is part of a healthy and vital Minnesota in the future, and that is why I encourage support for the A46 amendment.
Thank you, Senator Kent. Senator Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Kent. First, I sincerely believe that Minnesota lacks the population density that is necessary to support passenger rail, and consequently, I do not support the second train to Chicago. On the discretionary grant programs and the prohibitions that are in the bill, they're there primarily because we have no idea what those discretionary grant programs are going to spend the money on. We are being asked to appropriate money and then develop what they're going to spend it on later, and I don't agree with that approach. The amendment also takes, I believe it's the 36% of the auto parts sales tax bill that we've been working on all session. It takes, I think it's 36%, a good portion of it, and takes it out of roads and bridges and puts it into transit. I agree transit is important, but the idea of the auto parts sales tax bill has always been to target roads and bridges and infrastructure in that respect. And we will search for the necessary transit funding from a different source. Finally, on the guideways, I just disagree with Senator Kent's conclusion that guideways are really a good thing. I think they're very expensive. Remember that they are a dedicated right-of-way for either light rail or buses. They're very expensive. Significant opposition to some guideways, for instance, down in White Bear Lake, significant opposition to that. In addition to being very expensive, they're just not adaptable. Whereas if you take a look at bus rapid transit as an example, a much wiser use of money, not nearly as expensive. You can still move the people as is necessary in transit, and just don't have that enormous expense. And you know, if Southwest Light Rail doesn't scare you, it certainly should. Before we're done with that 14-mile stretch of light rail, it's going to cost the state of Minnesota taxpayers at some level, be it federal, county, state, it's going to cost over $3 billion before they're done. And it won't be done. It will have taken them a decade and a half to complete it, if they get it completed. So I am not a fan of guideways, if for no other reason than Southwest Light Rail.
Thank you, Senator Newman.
I would oppose the A46, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Kent renews her motion on the A46 amendment.
Madam Chair, roll call, please.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Ms. Johnson?
Chair Rosen,
Chair votes no.
Vice Chair Ingebrigtsen,
No.
Senator Marty,
Aye.
Senator Benson, Senator Champion,
Yes?
Senator Johnson,
No.
Senator Kent,
Aye.
Senator Kiffmeyer,
No.
Senator Lopez Franzen, and Senator Pratt.
No.
And Senator Benson, Senator Lopez Franzen.
There being 3 ayes, 5 noes, the motion does not prevail. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one more amendment, the A49 amendment.
I'm sorry, Senator Marty, A49 amendment?
A49, ma'am.
Senator Marty moves the A49 amendment.
And thank you, Madam Chair. I hope this one does get bipartisan support. This is one that I thought we had a commitment on last year. This is the Rondo project. I met a woman a couple months ago who lives in a second or third tier suburb who described herself as a Rondo displacee or refugee. I'm not sure what terminology she used, but she said her family was right there, and when the freeway came in, they were displaced, and it was tended to be people of color, tended to be low-income people who were displaced. We made some choices at that time that were harmful, and I think there was a lot of excitement in a lot of those communities about the fact we're going to reconnect Rondo. We were going to try and do something big and bold on this. I believe that this has been, we've been told this is a very promising thing for federal funds, that this would undercut, but this was an agreement. I thought we had a bipartisan agreement as part of the package last year, and to undercut this now, I think is a big mistake, and I urge the committee not to do this, to not back out of the commitment we already made. This says the Commissioner of Transportation must not expend any money for study, planning, preliminary engineering, or anything here. This is something we had a bipartisan agreement on. It wasn't, there are lots of things that pass around here that you may not support or I may not support, but in the end we come to a compromise, and this was part of the compromise that we came to. And to undercut it now, I think, is a slap in the face to a lot of people who, like that woman who still 55, 60 years later, still saw herself as a refugee from Rondo, because the planners at the time decided that they were expendable communities and we could just push them out of the way. And I think this is a way that gave a way of saying that some mistakes were made and we're going to try and deal with them and reconnect those communities. So I urge your support for this and ask for roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Newman.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Marty. First of all, this Rondo project is not included in the bill because I do not see Rondo as a transportation issue. I have heard Rondo described in terms of economic development. I've heard it described as a helping workforce. I've heard it described as housing. But in my view, it doesn't have anything to do with transportation. It isn't there to reduce congestion or increase lane miles or move people. Has nothing to do with transit. It has everything to do with committees that may have jurisdiction over this, like commerce or jobs. But this is not a transportation project in my mind. To the issue of a commitment by bipartisan agreement, Senator Kent brought that issue up yesterday in committee. And I indicated to the members of the Transportation Committee that if there was an agreement, I was not part of it last year. I believe that there was some money appropriated in the tax bill, but not in the transportation bill. And I am simply unaware of any type of an agreement or a violation of an agreement that occurred last year. However, having said that, if there was such an agreement, I do not want to be party to violating that, and I have assured Senator Kent that I am going to try and find out if in fact that occurred. But Senator Kent, I haven't had a chance since yesterday, but I will assure this committee, the same as I did to the Transportation Committee, I will try and find out an answer to that question, because I do not want to be party to a violation of any bipartisan agreement to fund Rondo in the transportation bill.
Senator Newman, I was there for this discussion, and this was not an agreement to fund Rondo at all. The agreement came from the speaker to put it into the tax bill, and that's it, not to finish the project. And that was something she desperately needed. And so I do also oppose this amendment because this is, I agree with you, it does not belong in transportation, and it certainly does not, there should never be any thought that there was a continued agreement to fund and continue on with Rondo. It was just what was passed last year, is
And
what we agreed upon.
Madam Chair, if I might, I mean, this statement really does bother me, that I am somehow bound by this agreement, and it has been now mentioned by 3 separate senators that there was this agreement. I just want to make sure, I wasn't there, you were, and in your view, the Transportation Committee is not bound by any bipartisan agreement to include Rondo in the transportation bill. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Thank you,
are
Madam
correct,
Chair.
Susan.
Madam Chair, to this
Sen-
point, please.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was in the tax bill. It was general fund dollars. I don't understand why now it is in the transportation bill to repeal that. So, to your point, there was an agreement, because that is the nature of the way these things happen. We accept things that we don't like, and we get things that we do like, and I fully appreciate, and that you were not a part of that. But it was agreed to move forward, otherwise we wouldn't have had the votes to pass the tax bill, I'm pretty sure. So, I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, that agreement was there. It does not affect transportation, to your point. So I don't know why it's included in the transportation bill, and it is going back on what had been agreed to last year in the budget that we have right now.
Madam Chair,
Senator Newman?
the information that I do have on that appropriation in the tax bill, I think was $6 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Nauman is looking up the language and the amount, too.
My understanding is that of that appropriation, it is all of it has been spent except 1.5, I think it's 1.5 or 1.2 million is left. And kind of an unusual move by the agency, at least in my view, that they have held back spending that million plus because of an intent to use it on the matching funds, which I just thought is kind of an unusual move for a state agency, while at the same time we're being asked to pony up the matching funds for Rondo and these other discretionary grant programs. So, I'm a little uncomfortable with appropriating money last year and then having the state agency hold back some of those funds with the intent of using them for matching funds this year. I'm not so sure that that is a straight-up way to do business either. So,
Thank you, Senator Newman.
for that, that reason, for the reasons given, I oppose the A49.
Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak on this amendment. Madam Chair and committee, I am a little shocked at what I'm hearing around the table. And I'm going to take a deep breath because I think it's ingenuous, in my opinion, for us to come a year later and then say something wasn't part of an agreement and reverse an appropriation that was done, and then say it's not a part of transportation, but it's in this bill in order to reverse something that was done before. I do see this as us reneging on our commitment, because it's my understanding The agreement that was represented to all of us, including our caucuses, was that this was a part of a global agreement which put a targeted community grant in the tax bill, put some other things in separate places in order to make sure those things go forward. But now for us to bifurcate those things and say that we're siloing those things and say it was not a part of anything I know or that I understand, I just think that's rather unfair. I think it's unfair for a number of reasons. One is because not only the targeted grants, but there was money that was given to rural Minnesota as a part of this agreement that we all understood. That was represented to me in my caucus. And Senator Newman, I'm disappointed to hear you say that this reversal that you have in your bill, that you don't understand it. But I don't know why there wasn't some additional work done before you put it in your bill in order to make sure that we were not creating hard feelings. So even to suggest, in your words, in my opinion, Senator Newman, that this is not a transportation issue, when this was a transportation issue, is because, first of all, the highway came down in the middle of the black community. And we can say, well, it doesn't address these other things. Well, there's something that is supposed to go on in order to make sure people are able to get from one side to the other, connectivity, make sure that there's a number of different things. So from my vantage point, I'm going to wait to see exactly what happens, because I think some representations that we make are a matter of our values. My dad always taught me, and God rest his soul, he's been dead now 6 years. He said that a man's word is his bond. And if we are getting into the practice now of making representations and then saying, hey, I wasn't a part of that, as if we should not be honoring each other's agreements, I find that disappointing, and I'm sad to hear it.
Well, I think Senator Champion, Senator Newman's got in the middle here, frankly. And it is very hard to, he said, she said, how far did that agreement go? And I'm sure you can understand that. And Mr. Nauman.
So, Madam Chair, I think I'm right that there's about 5.7 of the $6.2 million appropriation from last year that was part of the tax bill, and it's an appropriation to the Department of Transportation, the Commissioner of Transportation. So that's why it's now it's in this budget bill's jurisdiction. It was originally appropriated in the tax bill. The language on line 23.15 that says must not expend any money, in my judgment, would capture that 5.7 as well. So it would act as a restriction on the department's ability to spend 5.7 of that $6.2 million appropriation from last year's tax bill.
Mr. Nauman, though, isn't that already spent? I think that's what Senator Newman said.
I believe it's been encumbered. I don't know that it's necessarily been spent. And if I may,
Senator Newman.
I just want to very briefly respond to Senator Champion. The reason Rondo wasn't in the transportation bill last year is because I opposed Rondo in the transportation bill last year. I've been consistent on this. And was not in any way a part of the negotiations in the tax bill. So, I'm sorry that you're disappointed at the way I've handled this, but it was never my intention to put Rondo in the transportation bill because I don't think it's transportation related. It wasn't in there last year. It's not in there this year. So I am being consistent in that. As to what occurred at the leadership level, I honestly cannot say.
Senator Newman, Mr. Nauman and myself were just conversing because that was a year ago. And you're correct. You were adamant about this not being in the transportation bill. And because of the insistence from the speaker that this project of the $6 million needed to be funded, we put it in the tax bill. And much to your chagrin on that, for sure.
Madam Chair.
Senator Kent.
Thank you. I think this is incredibly troubling. You know, in my legislative career, my caucus leaders have made commitments on behalf of our caucus that I may not have really liked. But I understand that's what we do. That's how this works. And the fact is that the caucus leaders made that agreement last year, and the precedent that this sets, that we can make these agreements, because obviously if this was in there, something else was in there that your caucus really wanted, because that's the way this works. I'm not exactly sure. I believe there was an economic development project in Greater Minnesota that was attached to this. Do we want to repeal that now? This is really dangerous territory, Madam Chair, that I think we are potentially embarking on. What does it do if we just decide a year later that the commitments that were made as a part of a bigger deal don't matter anymore? We can just wipe them away, just take out our big eraser and make it go away. I don't think that's a place we want to be, and I think we should absolutely support Senator Marty's amendment.
Senator Kent, I will tell you, in negotiations last year, the entire discussion for transportation was predicated off of the IIJA being passed a year ago. And it was not passed a year ago. It just passed. So there was a lot of moving pieces. We are not bound to, the future legislature is not bound to what we did. And that's always how it's been. This was something that was extremely, just the $6 million was extremely important for the speaker to maintain cohesiveness in her caucus. And that is it. There was no further discussion about this project actually moving ahead without further funding from the IIJA. And so that's all we committed to last year, was just that, and not to the entire rest of the project.
Madam Chair? What I'm saying is that this repeals what that commitment was, exactly what you just said. You just, in the way you described it, we're just wiping it away. If we accept the language that is in this bill, and that's why we need to adopt this amendment, because what this bill does is it walks back on the agreement that was made, and I fully appreciate that Senator Newman was not a party of that, but it was an agreement that was made. And I think it is a horrible precedent if we let this language keep moving. And it wasn't, and I want to say this was not just about one individual and negotiating. And I say this,
What do you mean,
I
Senator
say
Kent?
this as a member of the East Metro community. And I represent part of Ramsey County. This is going back on a huge community of people who are counting on this. That's where the commitment was made. It was not just internal politics of a caucus. This is a commitment that was made to a group of people who has seen a real injustice by the creation of I-94 through their neighborhood, over their homes, over their businesses, the wiping out of generational wealth that was no longer available because a kid couldn't grow up and work in his dad's store and then inherit it. We took that away. And what this language, what the idea of Reconnect Rondo is to repair that. And so to say that this was just a caucus negotiation, and that was all the commitment was,
Leadership.
understates it.
Thank you, Senator Kent.
Madam Chair?
Senator Marty. Had his
Madam-
hand up first. I'll get to you, Senator Champion.
Madam Chair, I share a lot of the comments that Senator Kent and Senator Champion made. But I also want to say in response to Senator Newman that this absolutely is transportation related. It's a long time ago. But if you put this through $1 million mansions in somebody's neighborhood, you're going to be paying a lot of money to displace them. And here, we just kind of blew through it all, and people were not fairly compensated. That's why I started by introducing the amendment by talking about that woman who called herself a Rondo refugee. She lives in one of the further out, the middle range suburbs now, and she's saying 50, 60 years later, that's where she grew up. And it's not there anymore. And this is trying to compensate for that. And as Senator Kent mentioned, this is a whole community of people who are urgently saying, we need this. And the fact that bad decisions were made 50 or 60 years ago doesn't mean we just say, well, this isn't transportation related, because this is absolutely because where I-94 was put. So I absolutely think that's the case. And to say, well, you didn't want it in your bill last year. Well, if you accept my amendment, it won't be in this year's bill either. Because this is not spending any money. This is simply saying we made some previous commitments. If you take this out of the bill, which my amendment does, there won't be any mention of Rondo in this bill as there wasn't last year. So if we want to take it out of the bill, let's take it out of the bill, period. I mean, I understand you don't like it in the bill. But you're undoing it in the bill, and I'd say let's just take it all out of this bill and you'll be fine, because it wasn't coming from your appropriation last year, was coming from an agreement in the tax bill.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just briefly, I'll say a couple things, and then I'm going to leave. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm not happy about what I see, and I'm disappointed in the people's sitting around this table. But I will ask for a roll call.
Roll call requested. Roll call granted.
Number one, I'm disappointed when I hear Senator Newman say that he did not want this in his bill last year, and so forth. He did not agree with this, so he's being consistent. And it sounds like we're coddling that. With every ounce of respect, because I respect the people around this table, I find that disappointing. It's because you have leadership. I have leadership. I don't have to agree with something. But it has been the practice of this body that if our leadership reaches an agreement and we vote on it, then that's our word. Next thing that I'll say has nothing to do with you being adamant. And then I heard someone say that we should not bind future legislators. That too is an excuse, because we are the legislature who entered into the agreement. This is not for a future legislature, I'm sorry. Here's the other thing that I think we keep forgetting, because we keep trying to find excuses to not fulfill the commitment that we made to ourselves as colleagues and the people who are the subject of this discussion. There's no additional funding are we asking anyone for. This is not us coming saying, Senator Newman, we want some more money to finish the things that happened with Rondo, or what we said that we were going to do. That's not what we're doing here. We're asking you to honor the agreement that you made, and to suggest that this was just because the speaker wanted it. No. My good friend Senator Bach got a benefit, which was something that he needed in his district. Other people got what they wanted, whatever that was. We're not repealing those things. We're not calling those things back. We're only calling back the project that affects the community that we believe is powerless. So it's okay for us to betray our word with them because they're powerless. They mean nothing to us. And my colleagues, that is what I call an unfortunate set of circumstances. And in other places, Senator Johnson, they would call that betrayal. I see that as a betrayal of our commitment with all due respect, because I respect the people around this table. But when you step on the very people that have always been stepped on and find justifications in order to justify it, to me, that is a character flaw. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator
and
Champion.
Thank you, everyone, and I want to be
Senator
respectful.
Champion, that was a little rough.
I'm
Just
sorry?
gonna say, that was rough.
I'm sorry, Madam
And
Chair.
no, it's Senator Newman that has the apology deserved.
Well, listen, I will apologize to Senator Newman because I don't ever want to be disrespectful, but I think he should apologize to me and the people that I represent because what we're doing here is rough on them as well. So I will be a man and say, Senator Newman, if I've said anything to be disrespectful to you, I apologize. But I will remind you and this committee that you're being disrespectful to me and the people that I serve. So I'm waiting for an apology as well.
Senator Champion.
Madam Chair.
No, Senator Kent, I'm going to go to Ms. Boyd first, please. And could you please tell us, Ms. Boyd, how much has been expended out of the $6 million?
Madam Chair.
And what
just
is
give me
remaining?
1 second to pull that up. This was as of a few days ago, so essentially today, that of the 6.2 million appropriation, there is 5.74 million unexpended. 4.4 is encumbered, however. So essentially 450,000 has been expended. There is also 1.3 million unobligated that is, I suppose, in reserve at this point.
In reserve?
I believe that's being reserved for a federal funds match, which the language in the tax bill did allow for this project. So, if that's clear.
Okay, so
Madam
5.7
Chair.
million has not been spent.
Has
Senator
not been
Newman.
spent.
Could we take a brief recess?
Absolutely.
I'd like to visit with you about this.
Absolutely. We are in recess to the call of chair. E49 amendment before us, a roll call requested. Ms. Johnson will take the roll.
Chair Rosen,
Chair votes no.
Vice Chair Ingebrigtsen,
No.
Senator Marty,
Aye.
Senator Benson. Senator Champion,
Aye.
Senator Johnson,
No.
Senator Kent,
Aye.
Senator Kiffmeyer,
No.
Senator Lopez Franzen, Senator Pratt,
No.
Senator Lopez Franzen,
There being 3 ayes and 6 noes, the amendment does not prevail. Were there amendments? No. Senator Newman, if you don't have any closing comments, we're going to go ahead and take the roll. Nope. Okay. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, first,
We do have some motions, actually.
some motions, yes. The first one is I move that Senate File 1154 be laid on the table.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. And then we are going to bring Senate File 3975 from the table.
Madam Chair, I make
Senator
that motion.
Ingebrigtsen.
I make that motion. We move Senate File 3975 to be taken from the table.
On that motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I move to delete Section 58 on page 36 of Senate File 3975. This is a technical amendment.
On that motion,
I'm not quite done yet.
oh, I'm sorry.
This is probably the longest motion I've ever made in my life.
Sorry. The last one.
The identical section also appears in Senate File 1154, comma, the transportation omnibus, and does not need to be shown in two places in the combined bill. And if that's not real clear, I think staff would certainly be willing to clear it up.
Okay, clear enough? Okay. On that motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate File 3975 be amended to include the contents of Senate File 3875 as amended and Senate File 1154 as amended, and that staff be instructed to make the necessary technical and conforming changes.
On that motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate File 3975 as amended be recommended to pass and placed on general orders.
On Senator Ingebrigtsen motion,
Roll call.
roll call requested, roll call granted. Ms. Johnson, would you please take the roll?
Chair Rosen.
Chair votes aye.
Vice Chair Ingebrigtsen.
Aye.
Senator Marty.
No.
Senator Benson. Aye. Senator Champion. Senator Johnson.
Aye.
Senator Kent.
No.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Aye.
Senator Lopez Franzen. Senator Pratt.
Aye.
Senator Champion. And Senator Lopez Franzen.
There being 6 ayes and 2 noes, the motion prevails and the motion passes. Thank you very much, Senator Newman. Members, tomorrow we have a big day. We have Senate File 3510, Senator Thomasoni's Higher Ed Bill, Senate File 4269, Senator Senjum's Energy
I
Bill,
don't think they're ever going to let us.
Senate File 4091, Senator Pratt's Bill, Jobs Bill, and then House File 2746, Senator Howe's Hometown Heroes, and Senate File 4025, the Rosen's Opioid Settlement Bill. Thank you, Ms. Stengel and Ms. Boyd, too. And members, we'll see you tomorrow. Finance Committee is adjourned.
Thanks, Peg.